I have crossed over to become the real and fake heiress in the evil female supporting role, as the real heiress. As soon as I got home, my biological parents told me, "You need to be a bit accommodating to your sister, she has no father and no mother." I sneered, "I don't want to forgive them, I want them to live with guilt and regret, until they die, they must suffer torment. I will die when they love me the most. Watching them claw at their hearts in pain, that would be the most interesting." Ha 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 ha. When I said this, I laughed wildly and boldly, with pleasure gleaming in my eyes. To repay virtue with resentment, not possible. It will never be possible in this life. You must suffer like me for it to count as an apology. After all, why shouldn't I be the one to have a good outcome? When I first arrived, the original owner's adoptive mother had just passed away. The mechanical voice of the system echoed in my mind. The system 1207 reports to you that your body in the real world is in a coma. You need to fulfill the original owner's obsession to return to the original world. What is her obsession? I gently stroked the various scars on my arms, coldly watching my foster mother's body being cremated. She wants revenge and wants to live happily. I agreed. The original owner's memories flooded into my mind instantly, causing me some pain, followed by endless heartache. It turns out the original owner has been reborn 3 times. No matter whether she is obedient and well-behaved, or rebellious and degenerate, she can never compare to the status of that foster daughter in the hearts of her biological parents. Each time, she can only watch helplessly as the foster daughter enjoys a happy marriage and her parents have many descendants. She is the vicious supporting character from the true and false rich girl story, no matter how excellent she is. She cannot compare to Julia. In their eyes, she is a bad person. She gave up her parents and her betrothed sweetheart. In the end, I ended up with nothing. She was like a ridiculous complete outsider, and her end, in the end, was inevitably being plagued by illness, dying a violent death at the age of 26. But why? Why would that be? She didn't want love, or family, or anything. She just wanted them to suffer endlessly, to live with guilt and regret, until their deaths. They would be tormented. She wanted to live happily, even if she was alone. She hadn't had the chance to see the beauty of the world, the various landscapes and cultures. She wanted to go take a look. My nails dug into my flesh, and blood trickled out, tears flowed from my eyes, and when the wind blew, they cooled my heart. After the cremation, the staff handed me the urn. I opened the urn and poured the ashes into a nearby stinking ditch, and the grayish-white ashes quickly dissolved into the dirty, foul-smelling sludge. Then I walked away without looking back. According to the plot in the book, shortly after her adoptive mother died, the Mitchell family would quickly find her, because the Mitchell family's eldest son was seriously ill and needed a bone marrow donor. They had been unable to find a suitable bone marrow transplant. Julia insisted on donating bone marrow for her brother despite her parents' objections, only to find out that she was not the Mitchell family biological daughter. Then the Mitchell family found her through the clues from that year. The Mitchell family came to find her while she was attending class at school. The homeroom teacher, Ms. Linda, with tears in her eyes, called me outside and took me to the principal's office. The parents of the Mitchell family were waiting for her in the principal's office, and when I entered the office, I politely greeted the principal. "Hello, principal." The principal nodded, glanced at me, and then looked at the Mitchell family parents, seemingly unsure of how to start. I observed the Mitchell family parents. Indeed, the original owner looked very much like her mother. Mrs. Mitchell had tears in her eyes at this point, and she called me with a choked voice, "Nancy, I am your mother." Mr. Mitchell also looked very sad. I showed a shocked expression. "Mom." As soon as I finished speaking, tears fell from my eyes. I knew what I looked like now. Clearly already in the first year of high school, yet due to malnutrition, I was still thin and small. My hair slightly yellowed, and my school uniform jacket was washed to a pale color, that face resembling Mrs. Mitchell, with a pale complexion and dried blood scabs on the forehead, that was from my adoptive mother before she died, broken and weak. It was truly pitiful. Mrs. Mitchell became even sadder, walked over, and hugged me. I broke down and cried in her arms. After the reunion, Ms. Linda led me back to the classroom to pack my things. On the way, Ms. Linda gently ruffled my hair and said, "Nancy is going to transfer to a better school and now has a mom and dad. You must study hard and stay out of trouble, Nina." "Thank you, Teacher Linda." "Teacher Linda, I will miss you. I will not forget you." Teacher Linda had tears in her eyes, smiled and hugged me, and I returned her embrace, gently patting her back. Teacher Linda is indeed a good teacher, if it weren't for her. The original owner would not have been able to continue studying. The original owner did not live up to her expectations, achieving first place in every exam. She is truly an outstanding young girl. Back in the classroom, I quickly packed my things. Actually, there were only 2 items I wanted to take. One is the pen that Teacher Linda rewarded me with, and the other is the birthday gift that Teacher Linda gave me. A backpack. That was also the only birthday I ever celebrated. I got on the bus with the backpack, which only contained the pen that Teacher Linda gave me. I sat in the car, saying goodbye to Teacher Linda. After all these years, I don't know when we will meet again. Mrs. Mitchell asked me if I wanted to go home for a bit, and I shook my head. No need, my adoptive mother passed away a few days ago. Mrs. Mitchell sighed and patted my back, but was then worried about how Julia would feel if she knew her biological mother had already died. The Mitchell family's villa is quite luxuriously elegant. Julia waited in the living room early in the morning to hear the news. When I walked in with Mr. Mitchell and Mrs. Mitchell, she heard the sound and joyfully stood up. When she saw me, the joy in her eyes faded a little. At this time of year, it was summer, and she wore a beautiful short white princess dress, her skin fair and radiant, with red lips and white teeth, charming to behold, like an innocent little princess. But she still excitedly called out, "Mom and Dad, you're finally back." Mr. Mitchell and Mrs. Mitchell nodded with smiles. At this moment, I truly felt the original owner's feelings. Julia called out to Mrs. Mitchell and Mr. Mitchell to sit on the sofa. Mr. Mitchell turned around and called me over to sit together. Julia flashed her eyes and eagerly said, "Mom, I didn't know my sister was coming home, so I only brewed 2 cups of tea. I'll go brew another cup for my sister." I nodded with a smile. "Then I'll trouble you." Julia smiled awkwardly and went to the kitchen to make tea. The young beast has already begun to reveal its small claws in response to the invasion of its territory. After all, someone who was once loved by many would not be willing to no longer be the only one. Mr. Mitchell looked at me. "Nancy, since you have returned, your surname naturally should be changed back to Mitchell." I nodded in agreement with my head lowered. Mr. Mitchell was quite pleased. When they found her, they learned about the situation from the principal. This child had always been the top student in the school. She was both diligent and hardworking. However, one could not help but wonder if being influenced by such a family would lead to any bad habits. I knew what they were thinking. After all, with the original owner's many lifetimes of memories, I could guess their general thoughts with my toes. I raised my eyes to Mr. Mitchell. "Dad, there's something I want to discuss with you." "What is it?" "Speak up. I want to change my name." "Change your name?" Mr. Mitchell and Mrs. Mitchell were both taken aback. "Yes, I want to be called Nina." "Nina." Mr. Mitchell thought carefully about the 2 characters, then nodded and said, "A good name, okay." "Dad agrees. From now on you'll be called Nina." The name was decided. Mrs. Mitchell thought of Julia. She looked earnestly. "Nina, you've already met your sister, and we can't send her back. Mom doesn't have any other demands. I just hope the whole family gets along well, and everyone is just happy." I smiled slightly at the corner of my mouth and said, "I listened to my mom after all. Since I've been there, to be fair, I wouldn't want to send her back to such a family and environment." Mrs. Mitchell sighs in relief. Her eyes filled with bittersweet emotions. Julia came out with tea at that moment and placed it in front of me. The tea was clear and full to the brim. "Sister, have some tea." I picked up the tea and took a small sip, feeling that this phrase seemed a bit familiar. After taking a sip, I set it down and said with a slight smile, "Sister, I'm sorry, but I don't really like tea." Also, I smiled at her, and her eyes sparkled brightly. "Actually, we're about the same age, so there's no need for sister and younger sister. You can just call me Nina, and I'll call you Julia." Julia bit her lip. "Okay, Nina." After some casual chatting, Mrs. Mitchell took Julia back to the room, probably discussing something about her biological parents. Mr. Mitchell and I sat on the sofa, chatting about the situation of Harry, the eldest of the Mitchell family. Harry's condition is not too great. He has not found a suitable bone marrow transplant, so Julia wants to undergo a bone marrow transplant. Logically, I should also meet him. In the novel, Harry is a spoil-my-sister fanatic, doing everything he can for Julia, even knowing she is not his biological sister. Even when Julia makes mistakes, he will protect her. It is precisely because of his strong support that the marriage fell upon Julia. I don't have many thoughts on this. I'm just a man after all. But they are wrong in putting all those unfounded accusations on the original person's head. The original owner never thought of stealing her sister's fiancé. She had not even met him at that time. What the original owner does not understand is why everyone is so defensive of her, like they are guarding against a wolf. She wasn't as pretty as Julia at that time, but she had self-awareness, even after being reborn. She liked the male lead but never confessed her feelings. Regardless of whether she ends up good or bad, she never did anything to put the person she liked in a difficult position. In contrast, the male lead repeatedly placed her in awkward and embarrassing situations because of Julia, worsening her already not so great reputation in the circle. After a long time, Julia and Mrs. Mitchell finally came downstairs. Julia was sobbing, her eyes red. I watched with cold eyes, truly not understanding what she had to cry about. Was she crying because her mother didn't personally whip her with a thorny switch until her skin broke? Was she crying because her mother punished her by making her go hungry from time to time? Was she crying for her callous parents who almost drowned her because they despised her for being a girl? Was she crying because her mother almost sold her to an old man? Was she crying because her mother left her out in the rain in the dead of winter until she fainted from the cold and had a high fever that wouldn't go down? She probably still didn't know that it was precisely because her mother's belly looked pointed like a boy's that she ended up delivering in a large hospital. That's why the two of them were swapped at birth. If she knew that I scattered her mother's ashes, she would probably be even sadder. Just thinking about it makes me feel happy. Mrs. Mitchell comforted her, and I turned my eyes away, no longer looking at the two of them. Smiling, I said to Mr. Mitchell, I want to go see my brother tomorrow. Okay. I still heard Mrs. Mitchell quietly comforting Julia. It's all right, Julia, you will always be our treasure. Julia sniffled and said, I don't have biological parents anymore, Mom, I only have you all, even if I'm not the original. Hearing it still makes my heart ache, if that's the case. The original owner listened for 3 lifetimes, but it's okay, don't worry, I will fulfill what you want. The bittersweet feeling in my heart gradually faded, and I calmed down, the corners of my mouth slightly lifted, joining Julia's team. Julia, don't be sad, as Mom said, you still have us, even if you go back. The days there aren't really good, and, I hesitated for a moment, then continued speaking, your biological parents don't really like girls, just feel free to stay here, okay? Don't leave us, otherwise, how would I play? Julia choked up. She hadn't thought about leaving, had she? Mrs. Mitchell nodded vigorously in agreement. That's right, just feel free to stay at home. You see, they all know what kind of life you have, but they just avoid talking about it. It's really ridiculous, so ridiculous. I smirked sarcastically, watching their mother-daughter bond with cold eyes. After dinner, Julia clung to Mrs. Mitchell, wanting to sleep with her. I hesitantly looked at her and asked, Mom, can I sleep with you too? Mrs. Mitchell nodded happily. However, this happiness quickly vanished while I was taking a shower. Why am I still wearing a long-sleeved school uniform jacket in the summer? Of course, it's to cover the injuries on my body. Although the wounds on my body have scabbed over, they became infected due to improper treatment, and the surrounding skin swelled up significantly. The various wounds are painful just to look at. Wearing clothes hides the internal condition. Only by taking off my clothes can one see that I am injured all over. I can't just waste such a terrifying body of injuries. Otherwise, when the wounds heal, who will know? People are selfish, and that inevitably leads to favoritism. When I went in to take a shower, Julia had already finished bathing and was lying on the soft bed, asking Mrs. Mitchell to tell her a story. Mrs. Mitchell prepared clean clothes for me in the bathroom. While I listened to Mrs. Mitchell telling Julia a story, as I took off my clothes, my voice was panicked and timid, and I called Mrs. Mitchell 3 times before she finally reacted and replied to me, Mom, can you come here for a moment? I don't really know how to use this shower. Mrs. Mitchell walked up to the bathroom door and knocked on the glass door. I'm coming in, Nina, Mom, please come in. I used a bath towel to cover myself, exposing only my arms and legs, but that was enough. Mrs. Mitchell opened the door and came in. She looked at me and smiled. What's wrong? In the next second, the smile on her face froze. Her eyes were filled with disbelief, and tears instantly filled her eyes. She stared at me with wide eyes, trembling as she slowly approached me, and asked in a shaky voice, Who did this, Nina? Who did this? Tell me, tell Mom. Her icy fingertips slid over the scabbed yet still red and swollen wound on my shoulder, and I shrank back in pain. Does it hurt? Nina, I shook my head. It doesn't hurt. It will be fine quickly, Mom. I heal very quickly. I just can't figure out how to use this shower. I want to ask you. Mrs. Mitchell was crying so hard she could hardly breathe, trembling as she wanted to hug me, but my injuries left her at a loss. Finally, she covered her mouth and squatted down, sobbing uncontrollably. Julia heard Mrs. Mitchell's cries and quickly came to the bathroom doorway. She looked at my injuries and was shocked into a daze at the door. Mrs. Mitchell was shedding tears, shaking her head repeatedly, sobbing as she spoke. I'm sorry, Nina. It's Mom who is sorry to you. I still wanted to take a gamble, whether it was more painful for a biased daughter or for a mother to see her child, who was born after 10 months of pregnancy, abused to the point of having no unhurt part, after all. What the ears hear will never be as impactful as what one sees with their own eyes. Any mother who sees a child in such a battered state would probably be heartbroken. This injury would make anyone feel horrified. Mrs. Mitchell and Mr. Mitchell rushed me to the hospital overnight. Originally Julia also wanted to come along, but Mrs. Mitchell stopped her. She told her to rest well at home. In the car Mrs. Mitchell was crying the whole time. Mr. Mitchell had red eyes too, to make it easier to go out. I just put on a sleeveless dress. The material is soft, so it doesn't press on my wound painfully. I was thinking about whether to comfort the two of them, but after some thought, I decided against it. I turned my face to look at the rushing night outside the window. This was just the beginning. Originally, the former owner bought medicine to apply on her wounds to avoid worrying her parents. Her ability to recover physically is truly impressive, otherwise she wouldn't have known how to survive all these years. Even if she eventually showed her parents those scars, by then their hearts had already drifted to the Pacific Ocean, making it much harder to handle than it is now. She didn't choose the right moment to reveal her injuries, because something happened back then. When the original owner and Julia went out to play, Julia was riding her bicycle, and a stray cat suddenly appeared in front of it. She tried to avoid the cat and swerved to the side, falling and injuring her leg. At that time Julia probably had already realized that she also liked the male lead, and she kept implying that the original owner had pushed her down. Then she appropriately suggested that the original owner also liked the male lead, which turned into the original owner pushing her down out of jealousy for her sister. The original owner couldn't defend herself, and conveniently, there was no surveillance coverage there, and she really did like the male lead. Because of this incident, the original owner was shunned by everyone. Bit by bit, she turned from a confident and strong girl into a self-pitying and jealous person. Sometimes I can't help but think, this couple's biological son fell seriously ill, and they finally found a bone marrow transplant, but it hadn't been long before their biological daughter died of illness. That's probably also a punishment. I remained silent all the way until I got to the hospital. Mr. Mrs. Mitchell found me the best doctor, and when the doctor saw the injuries on my body, he was shocked and asked me if I had been abused. After asking, he looked at Mrs. Mitchell behind me with doubt. Mr. Mitchell awkwardly explained that this was the daughter they had just found. After understanding, the doctor looked at me with sympathy. He was familiar with Mrs. Mitchell, and probably had heard some rumors about the Mitchell family affairs. The wound is inflamed in some places, and the doctor suggested hospitalization. They will give me a full body checkup tomorrow. This child clearly looks like they have been malnourished for a long time. Let's check to see if there are any other issues to be at ease. Mr. Mitchell and Mrs. Mitchell nodded busily. Mr. Mitchell and Mrs. Mitchell arranged a single room for me, and after finishing up, Mrs. Mitchell sitting by the bed, with swollen eyes, asked me, Nina, do you blame your parents? I obediently shook my head. I don't blame them. It's already great that they can take me home. Nonsense. I don't even love them, so how could I blame them? I only have hatred. The words were calm, yet each one pierced the heart. Mrs. Mitchell couldn't help but cry again. Mr. Mitchell, holding back tears, couldn't help but ask me, Nina, how have you been all these years? Nonsense. Are you blind? Can't you see the wounds on me? Tears welled up in my eyes as I smiled and spoke. My original parents didn't like me. Teacher Linda told me to study hard, and I could live the life I liked in the future. But now I have parents, and I am very happy. Mr. Mitchell finally couldn't help but turn his back. I stayed in the hospital for 2 days, and the full examination didn't find anything wrong with me. Mr. Mitchell and Mrs. Mitchell also felt relieved. My body recovered quickly, and the injury had already started to heal in 2 days. Harry was also in this hospital. So when I asked to go see him, Mrs. Mitchell didn't refuse. Mr. Mitchell usually comes back in the afternoon, as he has a lot of work at the company. Besides, his eldest son is sick in bed, so he can't do much to help. When I entered the ward, Julia was feeding Harry grapes. She was sitting on the side of the bed, looked at me, and then gave Harry a grape. There's no denying that. Harry has a very handsome and well-defined face. Even though he had been in bed for a long time, his pale face and slightly sunken cheeks still showed his good looks. When he saw me in a hospital gown standing at the door, his eyebrows furrowed slightly, and his dark eyes stared at me. I turned my back to Mrs. Mitchell and smiled at him, a malicious and extremely mocking smile. Harry's eyes turned cold, and his eyebrows furrowed even more. Mrs. Mitchell then came out from behind me, and the two of them hurriedly called out, "Mrs. Mitchell, Mom." Julia put down the grapes and called me, "Nina." I smiled gently and nodded, then walked towards Harry. She called out obediently, "Brother." "Julia." Harry seemed a bit reluctant to agree with me, but out of respect for Mrs. Mitchell, he still reluctantly nodded. I raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Mitchell pulled me along to chat with Harry for a long time. And after learning about my experiences at my foster mother's, Harry finally softened his gaze a little. I sized up Harry, who was 21 this year. In the prime of his youth, Mr. Mitchell had already begun to let him take over company affairs. During the conversation, his gaze occasionally fell on Julia with a look of affection and care. To have feelings for my younger sister, whom I have been with for 16 years, is truly a vile thought. Harry, you really are something. I looked on with interest, recalling the memories of the original owner's past lives. She still seemed a bit naive and soft-hearted. After I recovered from my injuries, the Mitchell family held a celebration banquet for me. I asked Mrs. Mitchell to customize a moon-white cheongsam for me, paired with a white sheer shawl. The scar on my forehead made me cut bangs to cover it, and my hair hung halfway down my shoulders. Looking elegant and lively, Julia wore a white princess dress this time, her hair tied up, revealing her snow-white neck. The male lead Simon also came with his family. The young man was bright, with a straight brow and a handsome face, full of vigor. No wonder he was popular with girls. After greeting the parents of Mitchell family, the parents had a chat. Then Simon went straight to Julia. I caught a glimpse of their figures, and they really did look like a perfect match. Guests all praised me for looking very much like Mitchell's wife. And Mitchell's wife was very happy. Mitchell's husband publicly announced my identity, and moved to the point of tears. Mitchell's wife couldn't help but get teary-eyed. I was standing by, smiling gently, and no one saw the coldness in my eyes. Halfway through the banquet, I slipped out when Mitchell's wife wasn't looking. Sitting on a beautifully decorated swing in the small garden, I swayed and looked at the stars in the sky. The weather was surprisingly good tonight, as if to highlight the love between the male and female leads, with countless bright stars and a gentle breeze. What's ironic is that this swing was specially made and decorated by Harry to win the favor of Julia, but it wasn't a waste of his sincere feelings. At least his younger sister found love. Not long after, I stood in the shadows watching the girl shyly lean against the young man's chest. And I thought it was time to talk to Mitchell's husband and Mitchell's wife about the marriage between the Mitchell family and the Smith family. Early the next morning, Simon's mother came to visit. Of course, we're talking about the engagement that the two families arranged previously. I sat next to Simon's mother. Julia's face finally showed some panic, her hands unconsciously gripping the hem of her skirt. Simon's mother was smiling kindly. "Nina really looks like you. She's quite beautiful." I shyly smiled. The two talked for a while. Simon's mother finally got to the main topic. "The reason I came this time is to discuss the marriage between our families." Mrs. Mitchell unconsciously glanced at me, then said to Simon's mother, "Indeed, it's time to have a good talk. When we arranged their engagement, we never expected something like this to happen. Poor Nina had to go through so much suffering. But Simon and Julia have been together for so many years, and he has come to see Julia as a companion. The friendship of childhood isn't something that can just change." Sigh. "I really don't know what to do." Simon's mother sighed after speaking. I showed an expression of surprise, looking at Mitchell's wife. Mitchell's wife had no choice but to explain to me, "Indeed, there was an engagement before you were born. Does Mom mean that I was engaged to Simon when I was in your belly?" I asked in some surprise. "Simon is my fiancé." Mrs. Mitchell glanced back at Julia, seeing Julia looking down, as if she were about to cry. Mrs. Mitchell furrowed her brows slightly. "What you say is true. But, you see, Julia and Simon have been together for over a decade. Nina, it's difficult for Mom too. Nina, Julia, both of you are our daughters. The palms and backs of our hands are all flesh. Nina, you and Simon have only met once. Why don't you help your sister and them out? Okay. Simon's mother remained silent. Clearly acquiescing, I looked calmly into Mrs. Mitchell's eyes, observing her earnest face. I remember once I told them that I was the same age as Julia, but from the beginning, they called me sister, and Julia was called little sister, because in their subconscious, she was the one who needed protection. I asked, Mom, what if I said I fell in love with Simon at first sight? The three people in the living room were stunned by my words. They had been feeling happy. Julia looked up at me with disbelief. After a moment of panic, she suddenly seemed to recall something, and her eyes sparkled with confidence again. I suddenly smiled, my eyes turning into crescent moons. Just kidding, Mom, Aunt Smith, don't worry. When the time comes Julia and Simon get married, I will give them a big wedding gift. After saying this, I wrapped my arm around Simon's mother and playfully said, I felt very fond of Aunt Smith the first time I saw her. I was curious because I realized I had seen Aunt Smith before when I was a child. The frozen atmosphere immediately eased, and Simon's mother chuckled as she patted my hand that was around her. Nina has such a sweet mouth. It's like she's smeared with honey. I naturally knew that the Smith family favored Julia. Julia was raised by them. She was beautiful and had a good reputation, and Simon liked her too. And I am just a girl who returned midway. Let's not even discuss whether Simon likes me. Who knows what I went through during those lost years and what kind of troubles I got into, not to mention my character. Although my health has slowly been recovering, it is obvious that the family that raised me was not good at all. But who can guarantee that Simon will always like her? A few years can change a lot. After all, the world is unpredictable. As the saying goes, what you can't obtain is the best. This marriage is not important to me. I will give it to Julia. But Simon's heart is something I can't control. The best strategy is to conquer by strategy. Winning hearts is the priority. What I want is for her to self-destruct from her heart. Julia and Simon's marriage did not fall through. Julia was naturally overjoyed. When I came back, there were only a few days left until the summer vacation. The Mitchell family simply let me start school next semester. Julia's final exam results have been released, and she is at an upper middle level in school. For wealthy families, education is just a bonus. Mrs. Mitchell and Mr. Mitchell praised her as usual and advised her to teach her sister when she has the time. She nodded in agreement very decisively. I smiled. When one is in a joyful event, the spirit is high. Julia runs between the hospital and the Smith family, busily and diligently every day. I searched for a long time in the neighborhood and finally spotted a stray cat. It was a fat orange cat. Really, it was the fattest orange cat I have seen so far. I found a spot and started placing cat food regularly for it, and at first, it was just that orange cat, but soon a whole bunch came, of all colors. Coincidentally, Simon would always skate by while I was feeding the cats. He watched in disbelief as the single orange cat transformed into a whole pile of cats beside me. His expression gradually changed from aloof to shocked. That day, after I finished feeding the cats, he skated over and, surprisingly, stopped. Why do I see you every time I come here? Are you? I could hardly be bothered to move my eyelids. What do you think of yourself? Simon choked, and I naturally knew that Julia would definitely say something to him. He got annoyed with me and his ears turned red with anger. He looked at the cats surrounding me and couldn't help but squat down to call them over playfully. The orange cat happened to be right next to him and actually walked over to him. Simon glanced at me smugly. I smiled without saying anything, just calmly watching him. The next second, he screamed, "It hurts. Why is your cat still biting me?" I laughed out loud without any restraint. It should hurt. After the summer vacation, I entered the second year of high school. I took an entrance exam when I transferred to the new school. This is the school's rule. Mr. Mitchell said he also had no way around it. Because of the school's background, the Mitchell family is also not someone who can be casually provoked. Before entering the exam room, Julia smiled and said, "Sister, you should do your best. Even if you don't do well, it's okay. There are still Dad and Mom." I smiled brightly at her. Julia should also do her best and try to get into Simon and their class. Julia choked a little, her smile gradually fading. It seems they all thought my exam results wouldn't be very good, but I have to disappoint them. I finally got into Simon's elite class. Simon looked at me with some surprise, snorted, and turned his head away, clearly not wanting to talk to me. Mrs. Mitchell was surprised but also happy. Julia was on the side with a pouty face, watching Mrs. Mitchell genuinely praise me, her eyes flashing with jealousy. Later, when I passed by the kitchen, I heard Julia flirting with Mrs. Mitchell. "Mom, I didn't do as well as my sister. Will you stop loving me?" Mrs. Mitchell pretended to be angry and said, "What are you talking about? Would Mom not love you for this?" I knew Mom still loves me. The next morning, I found a very beautiful doll on the coffee table in the living room. The doll had a crown on its head and a princess dress decorated with glittering diamonds and pearls. I sat on the sofa and looked at the exquisite doll on the table. Mrs. Mitchell's voice sounded from behind. "Nina, what are you looking at?" "Oh, this doll. Julia treasures this doll the most. She's a little selfish and bossy, so be careful not to break it. If she comes to bother you later, it would be really annoying." "Mom, how much is this doll?" Mrs. Mitchell thought for a moment. At that time, Julia, when she bought it, it seemed to be nearly $1 million, right? She waited for a long time for it to arrive, and she treasured it immensely. Mrs. Mitchell glanced at me and asked, "Nina, do you like it too? I can buy one for you." I smiled and shook my head. "No, thank you, Mom." By the time I returned with a cup of water, the doll was already gone. I sat on the sofa and took a sip of water. $1 million, huh? I remember when my foster parents secretly sold me to that old man. It was for $50,000, not even a fraction of it, so how can I not feel resentful? That day I was in my room applying scar cream. Julia suddenly barged in, her eyes red with anger. "Nina, what on earth do you want?" She gritted her teeth and said angrily. When she saw my legs and arms, she was stunned for a moment, and a look of disgust flashed in her eyes. "So ugly." After hearing her words, I raised my eyes to look at her. The silky hem of my nightgown slid down my legs as I walked step by step toward her. Julia watched me as I approached her, a flash of panic and guilt crossing her eyes, and she unconsciously stepped back. What do you want to do?" I suddenly raised my hand and slapped her hard on the face. Julia was hit by me. Her little face turned aside, and her delicate face immediately swelled up. Tears fell from her eyes in an instant because of the pain. I pressed down on her shoulder, looking at her with a cold smile. "Do you know where these injuries on your body come from? They were inflicted by your own biological parents. Why should you possess things for so many years and assume they are rightfully yours? My things, even if I don't like them, others are not entitled to." "Julia, if you hadn't been unintentionally taken to the Mitchell family, the disgusting wounds on me would have been inflicted on you. You should be grateful to me, thankful that you weren't sent back. Otherwise, you would have been sold by your father to nasty and ugly old men as a wife, living a life in dark, cold, and damp alleys." Julia looked at me with fear in her eyes, shaking her head unconsciously, tears falling in big drops from her beautiful eyes. At this moment, I must seem to her like a devil that came out of hell. My heart skipped a beat, and I let go of her arm, releasing the shackles. Julia stumbled as she opened the door, rushing out in panic and sadness. After she rushed out, I stared blankly at her slender, scarred hand. Is she still affected by her resentment? Downstairs, Mrs. Mitchell looked confused when she saw Julia running out, calling out a few times Julia but getting no response. As she dashed out towards the main door, upon seeing me come out, Mrs. Mitchell hastily rushed upstairs to ask me, "Why did your sister run out crying? Did you bully her?" Tears streamed down my face as I sobbed, nearly unable to say a complete sentence. Mom, my sister said my scars look ugly and are particularly disgusting. I don't like hitting people, but I was too angry and sad. I couldn't control myself and slapped her." Mrs. Mitchell looked astonished, and upon hearing that Julia had been slapped, a sense of pain instinctively welled up in her eyes. But when she heard Julia say my injuries were disgusting, her brows furrowed with some anger. "What is she saying? Is the scar cream I bought for you useless?" I shook my head while sobbing. "It's effective." Mrs. Mitchell saw me crying to the point of gasping and walked over in a fluster to gently pat my back. "Don't worry, I'll definitely teach her a lesson when she comes back." Then she added, "But you shouldn't just hit people randomly. Julia is your sister, family. Talk things out nicely." I wiped my tears. "I know, Mom. Can you guess where Julia has gone? I feel a bit sorry when I think about it now." Mrs. Mitchell frowned and pondered for a while with worry. I'll call her and see if she went to the Smith family. After saying that, she called Mrs. Song and found out Simon had left early this morning. Ms. Mitchell was a bit confused. I spoke up, Mom, I guess Julia should have gone to the hospital to find her brother. Ms. Mitchell thought about it and agreed, as her daughter had been upset and always liked to go to her brother when she was troubled. She immediately told the driver to take us to the hospital. I certainly know that Simon is not at home, because Summer invited him out today. Simon was handsome, stylish, and from a wealthy family. Guys like him were plenty at school, and there were many girls who liked him. There weren't many Julia who were more outstanding, but there were still quite a few. I accidentally found out that Summer, the especially outstanding and beautiful girl at school, liked him. That day was afternoon art class, and the teacher had assigned us to do life drawing. Summer was sitting in front of her easel. Her long, jet black hair fell over her shoulders, and the orange-yellow sunlight of the sunset enveloped her graceful figure. She was bright and gentle, and I saw Simon's handsome profile on her easel, not far away. I gradually approached her and successfully became her friend. After confirming that she liked Simon, I started to help, telling her everything I knew about his preferences. I told her, everyone should have a chance to be brave for something they love. I wish Summer a victorious return. I personally created a perfect lover and gave it to Simon. Everyone has a scorecard in their heart for their lover. No one can love someone 100% all the time. The score will increase or decrease based on certain things. If a perfect pursuer who fits your taste, understands all your preferences and sorrows, and is exceptionally beautiful appears, would you be moved? The goddess steps down from her pedestal and sincerely falls at your feet. It's hard not to be moved. 17-year-old Simon was shaken, so when Summer invited him out today, he didn't refuse. When Summer excitedly called me to tell me about it, I knew that Julia would come to see me, because I am Summer's good friend who appeared during this time, and during this time, Summer is more breathtakingly beautiful than ever before. One must have self-awareness, although my face is good-looking. The years of deficit cannot be quickly made up in a short time. I have already lost the chance to make Simon fall in love at first sight. This candidate is no longer suitable for me. Anyway, whichever choice I make, I will achieve the effect I want in the end. Besides, Nina should be proud at her core. I find it dirty to touch Simon. When Mrs. Mitchell and I arrived at the hospital Harry's ward, we could hear Julia's crying from afar. How should I put it? In 8 words, deafening and heartbreaking. Those who don't know would think that Harry is dead. Mrs. Mitchell was heartbroken and hurriedly pushed the door open. I looked through the open door and saw Harry leaning against the head of the bed, full of heartache and affection. Julia was in his arms, crying like a child. Seeing Mrs. Mitchell come in, Harry first loosened his grip on Julia, and then upon seeing me, his expression immediately turned cold. Mrs. Mitchell didn't notice anything, but knowing his thoughts made it quite amusing for me to watch the drama unfold. Seeing Mrs. Mitchell had arrived, Julia sobbed as she pulled away from Harry's embrace. Mrs. Mitchell gently held her close, patting her back and saying, "Julia, don't cry, don't cry. Really, how could you say such things? Your sister felt guilty after hitting you, and that's why she hurried over to find you. You see, what often makes me sad are the details. The detail is that when I was sad, you only patted my back, while when she was crying, you held her in your arms. There was a moment when I thought of letting you all go." Suppressing the bitterness in my heart, I gave Harry a sweet smile. Julia glanced at me with fear in her eyes, meeting my smile, shuddered, and then sobbed, not daring to look at me again. Mrs. Mitchell sensed Julia's fear, signaling me with her eyes to apologize quickly. I was about to speak, but was suddenly interrupted by Harry's voice. "Nina, who taught you to hit others for no reason?" Quickly apologized to Julia. I could tell just by listening, Julia has been crying for such a long time, but she still hasn't said why she wasn't hit. Why hit someone for no reason? I looked at Julia with a mocking smile. "Julia, do you think I hit people for no reason?" Julia curled up in Mrs. Mitchell's arms, sobbing and too scared to respond. Harry saw this and repeated it again, his tone stern. "Nina, apologize quickly." I was really amused by his anger, turning around to look directly at Harry. "Brother, I'm really curious about how you helped Dad manage the company. With your underdeveloped brain, I have always looked down on Harry. He, as an heir, couldn't control his emotions and fell in love with his adopted daughter, whom he had called his younger sister for 16 years. For her happiness, he transferred half of the Mitchell family company's shares to Julia's name as a dowry. and sent Julia off with a grand wedding. He knew his real sister had terminal liver cancer, but he didn't tell his parents, claiming it was to prevent them from worrying, and let his real sister die alone and in pain in the hospital in her final moments. In both of her previous lives, the original owner died alone and in pain. In her first life, she didn't even know the reason for her death, and she often fell into a coma from the pain. It was only after being reborn that she accidentally learned from the nurse's conversation that she had late-stage liver cancer. She finally realized that she was merely a malicious supporting character in the fake and real rich girl story, which was the ending chosen for her by the author. Thus, in her third life after rebirth, she chose to commit suicide by jumping into a river on the eve of being taken back to the Mitchell family. However, her resentment accumulated over 3 lifetimes and she could never let it go, knowing that Julia had the personality of a naive and sweet little princess. Half of the Mitchell family company's shares would definitely end up in Simon's hands, meaning that the Smith family would have half of the Mitchell family company's assets. Originally, it was a family monopoly, but Harry, as if his head had been kicked by a donkey, insisted on giving half away. He brought in wolves. And Harry did a great job. People like them, as a qualified heir, should always put the family's interests first. For a woman, Harry not only handed over his family's assets, but also let his own real sister, who might have grown up to help him manage the Mitchell family company, die alone and in pain at the age of 26 in the hospital. The Mitchell family company would rather fail in Harry's hands than in mine. Harry is not a qualified heir, nor a qualified son. And definitely not a qualified brother, but to Julia, he is a qualified time bomb. I increasingly want to see the wonderful expressions of the Mitchell family parents when they find out that Harry has fallen for Julia. It's said that the ones close to the water tower get the moon first. If outside people find out that Harry has feelings for his foster sister, what will they think? What would the Smith family think? Rumors can kill people, just like they used to do. Harry listened to my mocking words, his brow furrowed, and the anger in his eyes nearly materialized and burst out. Nina, is this your attitude when talking to me? Did I say something wrong? You want me to apologize because I hit her? Then why don't you ask why I hit her? Or should I say brother, Julia never told you the reason at all? Harry stared, looking at Julia. Julia was crying, her face wet with tears. And upon hearing my words, she cried even harder. Julia, you. I glanced at Julia out of the corner of my eye, and she looked terrified, muttering without saying a word, brother, let me tell you why I hit her, because she said that the scars on my body from her biological parents are disgusting. How funny, her biological parents also said the same thing, right? Is the influence of genes really that big? Mrs. Mitchell suddenly got angry and shouted at me, stop talking. Julia was completely panicked at this moment. Pale-faced and leaning against Mrs. Mitchell's arms, Harry turned pale, looking at me in disbelief. With a doubtful expression, I smiled gently, no longer looking at him, and turned to Julia saying, Julia, I hit her a bit harder back then. You won't be angry with me, right? We are all family. Julia opened her mouth but couldn't say anything. I suddenly found it all very uninteresting. True and False Twin is characterized by the fact that the female lead is foolish but cute, and the supporting characters have some questionable intelligence. I just find stupid people really annoying. It makes me angry, and they are stupid without even realizing it. Mom, I'm going home first. I didn't feel like staying any longer, and in half an hour, Mr. Mitchell would be back. I have something else to do. Before leaving, I looked at Harry with a meaningful glance, seeing the flicker of confusion in Harry's eyes. I left satisfied. Although I didn't let Mitchell's wife realize her son's thoughts, planting a seed of doubt in her and Harry's minds was also beneficial for me. The driver of the Mitchell family took me to the Mitchell family when I happened to run into Simon, and I noticed the subtle willingness on his brow, which indicated that things were going well. I lied to Summer. The marriage between the Smith family and the Mitchell family is well known in the circle, and I told Summer that because of my return, Julia is no longer Simon's fiancée, and since I don't like Simon, the engagement between the two families is nullified. Moreover, because the Mitchell family's parents want to maintain Julia's reputation, they have not made it widely known, but it still needs to be announced at some point. Simon will still need to marry in the future, and this period is her best opportunity. As for Julia occasionally visiting Simon, I explained that even though the engagement is nullified, they are still friends. Regarding the situation of remaining friends after a breakup, I've seen it too often in their circle, and because I am indeed the biological daughter of the Mitchell family, Summer chose to believe me. I am sorry for having used her, but I do not regret it. During this time, Julia was busy with Harry's matters, and the frequency of her seeing Simon decreased significantly. Everything was just right. Simon's figure gradually faded from my sight. If everything goes as I have calculated, then soon, I will get what I want. Looking at the gradually darkening sky, I felt a bit melancholy for once. Mr. Mitchell returned home in the evening, at which time Mitchell family the cook had already prepared dinner and set it on the table. After he entered, he looked around but didn't see Mrs. Mitchell and Julia too, so he asked me, "Where are your mother and your sister?" "I didn't see them too," I obediently answered him. "My mother and Julia went to the hospital to see your brother. I was supposed to go with them, but I came back home at the last minute because of something." "Oh, I see." This was the first time Mitchell family since I came back that I was alone with Mr. Mitchell, and at the dinner table, neither I nor Mr. Mitchell spoke, creating a dull atmosphere that made him a bit uncomfortable. Mr. Mitchell tried to start a conversation. "Nina, how do you feel about school?" "It's fine." The conversation suddenly came to a halt, and Mr. Mitchell finally stopped talking. After dinner, Mr. Mitchell went to the study to deal with company matters, and Mrs. Mitchell and Julia had not yet returned. I asked the aunt to prepare a portion of pineapple berry and brought it to the study. Pineapple berry is Julia's favorite. Not only her, Mr. Mitchell also likes it, so Mrs. Mitchell always keeps it at home. I knocked 3 times on the door in front of the study. "Dad, can I come in?" A reply from Mr. Mitchell came from inside the study. "Come in." I pushed the door open. Mr. Mitchell was sitting in front of the desk, with several documents on the table, frowning as he looked at the computer. "Is there something, Nina?" I stepped forward and placed the cleaned pineapple berry on the empty desk. "Auntly washed a few strawberries. I brought them up for you to taste." Just leave it there." I glanced at the computer screen and asked, "Is Dad worried about Uncle's matter?" Mr. Mitchell looked up at me in astonishment and said, "How would you know about this? When I visited my brother, he happened to tell me this," he said. "After all, I am a child of the Mitchell family and should know about our family's business." Mr. Mitchell thought for a moment and nodded. "If a compatible bone marrow is not found, the heir of the Mitchell family cannot be a sickly person who relies on medication to survive. There are only 2 ways to deal with it. One is to have me provide bone marrow, and the other is to nurture a new heir. However, cultivating a new heir would take too long, and would also test that person's abilities and talent. Before a suitable bone marrow is found, the best and most direct method is for me to donate bone marrow to Harry. The Mitchell family is a joint stock company, and the Uncle James the first mentioned is a shareholder of the Mitchell family company, named James. Currently, he holds nearly 1/3 of the company's shares, which has threatened Mr. Mitchell's position. The composition of the board of directors and the determination of board members are the results of the power struggle among shareholders. Ultimately, whoever has the most people on the board will likely determine the company's direction. Therefore, Mr. Mitchell has been extremely busy lately. The novel hardly mentions this period, but this matter also implicated Harry, at that time. The Mitchell family father and son put in a lot of effort to deal with this matter. Meanwhile, the Smith family also offered a bit of help to the Mitchell family, which can be seen as assisting the Mitchell family, further promoting the relationship between Simon and Julia. I am currently only 17 years old, and to enter the Mitchell family's company, I still need Mr. Mitchell to lend me a helping hand. After all, heirs are trained from a young age. Harry was taken by Mr. Mitchell to handle company affairs when he was 15, but first, I need to let Mr. Mitchell have this idea. When I came out of Mr. Mitchell's study, I happened to run into Mrs. Mitchell and Julia, who were returning with shopping bags. The smiles on their faces indicated that they were in a good mood. I stood upstairs, listening carefully to the conversation between mother and daughter. After I left today, Mrs. Mitchell took Julia to a luxury store to buy things as a reward. They met quite a few acquaintances, most of whom said that Julia had a good relationship with Mrs. Mitchell. Julia's cheerful tone was like a bird fluttering in a cage. "Of course, Mom treats Julia the best." I smiled and lowered my gaze, then turned and entered the room. In fact, the Mitchell family parents might not be that fond of Julia, they just seek a name, just like only Harry can inherit the Mitchell family business. They have already defined Julia's future, raising Julia to be a naive and kind aristocratic young lady, before discovering the mix-up, unless Harry dies. Otherwise Julia will never become the heir of the Mitchell family. They are unwilling to let outsiders say that because their biological daughter has returned, they are abusing their foster daughter, robbing the good marriage of the original foster daughter. And Julia just happens to be the perfect image of the daughter they envisioned, hence they are unwilling to acknowledge reality. So outside, Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell would rather have their daughter suffer than leave the reputation of favoritism in the outside world. Then, I will make their pride destroy the face they cherish. After a while, someone knocked on my room door, and outside came the soft voice of Julia. "Nina, Mom has a surprise for you. Can you come out for a moment?" I put away the materials on the table and got up to open the door. Outside the door stood Mrs. Mitchell and Julia, both holding clothing bags. Mrs. Mitchell wore a kind smile, and although Julia looked a bit unnatural, she was clearly being cheered up. The joy in her eyes was undeniable. Miss Mitchell handed me the bag with a smile. "Nina, these are the clothes I picked for you and your sister. Try them on to see if they fit. Next weekend, there's a party, many people will be going, so tomorrow I'll go pick out a formal dress for the two of you, so you can both look beautiful." I smiled and took Miss Mitchell's bag. "Thank you, Mom. I like it very much." With great understanding, no one mentioned that matter again. Only Harry became more suspicious of me, but what could he do? Since he couldn't find a suitable bone marrow transplant, he had to rely on medication to keep going, and his health was getting worse and worse. Now, most of the company's affairs fall on Mitchell alone. I deliberately showcased my exceptional business acumen in front of Mr. Mitchell to seek an opportunity to enter the Mitchell family company. Mr. Mitchell has also unintentionally mentioned the company's matters in my ear recently. The first thing to deal with must be James, as the shares he holds are not easy to get rid of. This actually made me a bit worried. The weekend banquet has quickly arrived. Mrs. Mitchell prepared dresses for the two of us, one white and one green. The white one is Julia's favorite, so I chose the dark green one. Both dresses are relatively simple and elegant, and to cover the scar on my arm. Mrs. Mitchell also added a thin shawl for me. I told her it wasn't necessary, as the scar on my body has faded a lot, and I could just use some foundation to cover it up on that day. The richness indeed nurtures people. I have been taken care of by the Mitchell family for so many days. My skin has regained its whiteness, and my scars have mostly healed, except for some deeper ones, which can completely be covered with foundation, after putting on my makeup. I looked at the face in the mirror that resembled Mrs. Mitchell. It was stunningly beautiful, truly a beauty. The banquet was held at a luxurious high-end hotel. The entrance is bustling with cars and extremely lively. Mrs. Mitchell showed the invitation letter and entered the venue. The first thing that caught my eye was the splendidly decorated venue, followed by the elegantly dressed crowd. The scent of clothes mingles as glasses clink together. I walked beside Julia and Mrs. Mitchell and felt the curious and scrutinizing gazes from the people around me. With a constant smile on my face, I conversed with the ladies and gentlemen introduced by Mrs. Mitchell in an elegant and courteous manner. "Nina, come over here with me for a moment." Mr. Mitchell suddenly appeared and called me over. Mrs. Mitchell was a bit surprised, but said nothing, and Julia took this opportunity to say goodbye and prepare to find Simon. I spotted him at a glance through the crowd. I followed Mr. Mitchell towards that man, the bright lights shining on his chiseled face. I could see his eyes clearly, tender and deep. He stared intently as I approached. The man was dressed in a navy blue suit and a silver tie, tall and elegant. His pair of affectionate eyes captivated me. Those eyes gave me a sense of déjà vu. Mr. Mitchell smiled and introduced me to them. "This is my daughter Nina. Nina, this is Mr. Parker." So it was him. After a faint smile, I said, "I have long heard of Mr. Parker. Nina, Miss, is truly elegant and outstanding." He smiled, and his eyes seemed more affectionate. Unfortunately, the smile did not reach his eyes. I searched my memory. This book is real fake daughters. The plot is mostly about the male and female leads being affectionate. But there are also descriptions of Mr. Parker in the book, who is very rich and very powerful. In short, he is very useful. Mr. Parker is Kevin Parker. Their family's business has always been developing overseas. In recent years, after Kevin Parker returned, the Parker family business has rapidly developed in China. However, just like Parker family's business is spread across other countries, the business in China is just an extension of the Parker family's business. And Kevin Parker will eventually have to return to the United States. Kevin Parker was standing next to a beautiful woman. I recognized her. She is a female star who became popular in recent years. Mr. Mitchell talked about the company project with him. I guess Mr. Mitchell's intention is to seek Kevin Parker's help for the Mitchell family this time. In fact, Mr. Mitchell's action is not much different from inviting a wolf into the house. It's just that the decision-making power mainly lies in Kevin Parker's hands, but for me, it's not important. Just if I gain control of the Mitchell family company, it would be more beneficial for me. In the middle of the banquet, I finally had a moment to rest. I found a quiet balcony and looked out through the floor-to-ceiling window at the distant vast coastline. This area is very prosperous, and the deep blue sea by the coast was illuminated with colorful reflections. Kevin Parker appeared behind me at that moment. I didn't turn around. After he stood beside me, I looked at him, and he also looked at me with a loving gaze. After a while, I smiled and said, "Mr. Parker," from a high place, "the scenery is really beautiful." He no longer looked at me, but smiled and looked at the scenery outside the window. Indeed, after that banquet, I was smoothly brought into the Mr. Mitchell's Mitchell family company. Many affairs were easy for me to handle. James is indeed a difficult person, because he went to great lengths to acquire internal shares. His goal was to seize the company's control. He had been planning for so many years, so how could he just give up? However, with Kevin Parker's help, it's not that difficult. At 1 o'clock that morning, I received a phone call. After hanging up the phone, I crossed out the words in the book. The next day after school, I went to see Harry. His face was even paler than before, and his cheeks were severely sunken. He is now refusing to see Julia. Every time Julia comes, she can only talk to Harry outside the door, making Julia feel sad for quite a while. I heard from the nurse that it was his other sister who let me in. "What are you doing here?" Harry looked unpleasant and asked me in a bad tone. I just quietly looked at him for a while. Harry became a little uncomfortable under my gaze. I suddenly asked, "Brother, does it hurt a lot?" Harry looked at me in astonishment, his pupils trembling slightly. After a long pause, he awkwardly asked, "Why do you ask this?" I gradually felt my eyes redden. "Brother, I know I was wrong. Please don't be angry with me anymore. I want you to get better. You have to take care of yourself." As I spoke, tears fell like pearls. Harry gradually became somewhat flustered. He struggled to say, Please don't cry." Harry urged me for quite a while before I managed to stop crying. He lectured me again. It was just about studying hard and getting along well with Julia and such. When he learned that Mr. Mitchell had allowed me to join the company, he was both astonished and a bit lonely. I quickly comforted him. "Brother, you will get better." He forced a smile as he left the ward, and I calmly wiped away the tears on my face. After returning home, the hospital notified that they had found a matching bone marrow for Harry. Mrs. Mitchell was overwhelmed with joy and cried as she notified Mr. Mitchell of this news. A family was enveloped in joy. Mrs. Mitchell glanced at me with a hint of guilt in her eyes. I smiled, displaying an expression of both joy and sadness. Harry is suffering from aplastic anemia, and there is about a 70% chance that he can be cured after a bone marrow transplant. A 70% chance is not too high, but a bone marrow transplant is the best method compared to others. The surgery is scheduled for a week later. During this week, Mrs. Mitchell prepared a lot of supplements. The smell of them later made my head ache a bit. Sticking to the principle of not wasting, I let Mrs. Mitchell put them in my room first, and I would drink them after they cooled down. Julia was not aware of the bone marrow transplant. Julia looked at Mrs. Mitchell with some envy over her concern for me, wanting to drink as well, but after being scolded by Mrs. Mitchell for a few words, she pouted and returned to her room. Mrs. Mitchell did not bother to pay her any attention, and I simply chose not to see, staying rarely out of my room. After undergoing a comprehensive examination, Harry and I were pushed into the operating room. The surgery was very successful, and the next period of time would depend on Harry's fate, but I insisted that he must survive. He cannot die on the hospital bed. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, it was already the second semester of senior year. During this time, Harry's health was slowly recovering, and he gradually started to take over the company's affairs again. However, Mrs. Mitchell was worried about his health, and since Harry had experienced rejection reactions after the transplant, Mr. Mitchell still occasionally asked me to handle some company matters. Once in senior year, some classmates in the class had fewer choices and mostly opted to study abroad. Summer's seat was empty, and Simon would always unconsciously stare blankly at Summer's empty seat. Julia called out to him several times before he heard her and walked out. In the corridor, Julia complained that he didn't care about her and pretended to be angry, accusing Simon of ignoring her during this time. With a wronged look, she asked Simon, "Do you not like me anymore, brother Simon?" Unexpectedly, Simon suddenly exploded in anger. "Julia, can you please stop asking such childish questions?" After saying that, she left the corridor, leaving Julia stunned in place, awkward and sad, crying alone in the corridor. I sat by the window, coldly watching Julia sobbing as she left. Summer left decisively. She knew I had lied to her, or rather, she had always known. Before going abroad, when she called me, her voice was hoarse, clearly having cried. She asked me, "Nina, didn't you say that the engagement between the Mitchell family and Smith family was called off? Why are you lying to me?" "Summer, you really don't think I would believe that you know nothing, do you? It's rare to find someone as simple as Julia," I scoffed. "Do you think I don't know that you've been telling people behind my back that I was the one who encouraged you to get close to Simon? You just wanted a reason to get close to someone who is already engaged to Simon, and I gave you that. Now you come here to blame me for lying to you. What does that mean?" Summer remained silent for a while, then she choked up and said, "But I liked him for so long. Before going abroad I asked him if he liked me, and he still didn't answer. If he had only said he liked me, I would have stayed." I rarely had the patience to listen to Summer rambling and crying for a long time, and I couldn't help but think of Simon, whom I had liked for a long time, and Nina. Watching the one who should have been my betrothed, filled with love, marrying a stepsister in a beautiful wedding dress. Her smile was bright at that time, but who could know that her heart was broken? Looking back now, Summer might be luckier than her, who never spoke of love before. Kevin Parker concealed his identity, Mitchell Family Company. Except for the shares held by Mr. Mitchell and James, the shares in my cooperation are now slowly and silently transferred to Kevin Parker's hands. Once Kevin Parker cooperates with Mr. Mitchell, successfully acquires the shares held by James, when Mr. Mitchell keeps his promise and gives Kevin Parker 1/6 of the shares, then Kevin Parker will be the largest shareholder of the company. What I need to do is get Mr. Mitchell's shares and use them as leverage. If someone is willing to remove the obstacle for me, why shouldn't I take the opportunity? That's what it means to use someone else's sword to kill. Julia was heartbroken by Simon and went home and cried for a while. Mitchell Mrs. asked her about the reason. Julia cried and told her the whole story. Her words implied that Summer was the one who seduced Simon and made Simon lose his heart. Mitchell Mrs. was very surprised. How could that be possible? Simon, that child is not like that. Julia sat on the sofa, wiping her tears. I believe Simon is not that kind of person. He must have been corrupted by that girl, Mom. What if Simon no longer likes me and doesn't want to marry me? Mrs. Mitchell had a serious expression and went to find Simon's mother the next day. Meanwhile, in the evening, Kevin Parker called me, inviting me to enjoy James the old fox's embarrassed state together. I happily went, under the double pressure of Mr. Mitchell and Kevin Parker. James was a bit overwhelmed, but James was, after all, also a formidable old fox, enduring against Mr. Mitchell and Kevin Parker for so long. But when I arrived Kevin Parker Company, what was waiting for me was a candlelight dinner instead. It must be said, under the warm orange candlelight, Kevin Parker, his face was indeed breathtakingly handsome. He gently poured me a glass of red wine, which shone like a ruby under the candlelight. Kevin Parker looked at me, and his loving gaze gave me the illusion that I was his one and only love. However, I had once seen the female star he had once lifted up being unceremoniously thrown out of the company building, without any mercy. It's just a game. Where does the sincerity come from? I smiled and took the red wine he offered, taking just a sip. "Mr. Parker, don't look at me like that. I don't lack love." Kevin Parker smiled, his eyes showing no concealment of his interest in me. "Miss Sue, I just want to get to know you better. Why are you so resistant? If I really resisted you, why would I still stay here?" A woman's reluctant resistance. "Mr. Parker, you should be well aware of it in the sea of flowers." I smiled as I looked at Kevin Parker and said with deep affection, when I was sent back by Kevin Parker's driver to the Mitchell family home, Mitchell's wife had already returned home. She was hugging Julia and comforting her. "Simon, he is a responsible child who cares about the face of both families." Julia, don't think too much about it. Aunt Song also said she would educate him well. Julia, seeing me back and hearing Mrs. Mitchell say this, she wiped her tears while sobbing. After that day, Simon didn't speak hurtfully like before, but his attitude towards Julia was much colder. It seemed that Simon noticed the coldness. Julia also sulked and ignored him, running off to Harry every day after school. But she didn't know that a cold man could disappear. With Julia's support, Harry has recovered about 70 to 80%. He is preparing to gradually take over the affairs of the Mitchell family company, and because of his previous illness, he took a year off from school. Now he is also preparing to return to school to complete the unfinished courses, but I will not give him the chance to return to the company. Mr. Mitchell can only have the shares in his hands, if nothing unexpected happens. In Julia's year of preparing to enter university, James went crazy, desperately creating a car accident that directly led to Mr. Mitchell being paralyzed. It was also at that time that Harry ended his university courses early, supporting the Mitchell family business. Harry was busy to the point of exhaustion, but he never expected his parents to be so determined to Simon and Julia get married. Mrs. Mitchell said with tears to Harry and Julia, "Your father has dreamed of seeing Julia happy. If he can't see Julia get married in this state, it will be a regret for his whole life. I don't want your father to leave with regrets." So Harry had no choice but to let go, heartbroken as he watched the person he loved marry someone else in a wedding dress. How deep the second lead's feelings are, he just couldn't understand. At this moment Mr. Mitchell wanted Julia to get married, which was to ensure Harry received Smith family support, to prevent Kevin Parker from becoming the next James. This way, even if he died, his son could still keep the company. However, since my brother is so reluctant, as his good sister, I naturally have to help him get his treasure. I'm not sure whether Simon has looked for Summer during this time, but before I complete the second step, Summer cannot come back, so I called Summer. On the other end of the phone, Summer was indeed a bit hesitant. I found it somewhat amusing. "Summer, do you think that if Simon knew that the soulmate he believes in was taught by the person he dislikes, would he be heartbroken? What do you want to do?" Summer questioned me loudly in panic. "As long as you stay abroad, nothing will happen." I then administered a strong dose. "You have seen it too. Simon still has a place for you in his heart. Since that's the case, Summer, have you never thought about becoming Simon's wife? Making him belong solely to you. I can make you his wife, just like I did before, making Simon have a place for you in his heart. Of course, this requires your help." The line was silent for a long time, and after a while, the voice of Summer came through. "What do you want me to do?" I said with a smile. "By staying abroad, you can contact Simon, but keep a distance, okay?" Summer is also a proud person. Being threatened like this must not sit well with her. But if I can offer her what she wants, it would be different. A slap followed by a sweet date. She may not feel grateful, but at least she will listen obediently. After hanging up, I lay back on the bed, tired, attempting to call 1207 for the 9th time, except for when I first arrived. 1207 had appeared to help me understand the general plot of the novel and accept the original owner's memories. After that, I occasionally called for it, but it never responded to me again. I waited for a while, and there was no response in the silent, pitch-black room. The moonlight from outside shone through the window into the room. I curled up on the bed and slowly put my head into my arms. These days Simon has been emotionally unstable, with a cold aura surrounding her. Julia had intended to stay cold Simon and make him apologize first, but Simon never bowed his head, and instead they argued a few more times. This time Julia was really heartbroken. Her eyes looked puffy every morning. Harry on the day before his discharge, I brought a bouquet of flowers to see him. After Mrs. Mitchell and Julia took care of him for several months, Harry has now recovered his previous handsomeness, making the nurses in the hospital feel a flutter in their hearts. I took a look at Harry's physical condition, and he seemed to be doing well, so I smiled and handed him the bouquet. "To celebrate your upcoming recovery and discharge." Harry smiled slightly as he took the bouquet. "Thank you, Nina." He then placed the bouquet on the bedside table, positioned directly facing the bed. After some small talk, Harry asked if Julia and I had any universities we wanted to apply to. Julia excitedly said she wanted to get into her brother's school, and Harry looked at her with a doting smile. At this moment, I felt a bit out of place. Harry then looked at me, and I touched my nose and replied to him, "I haven't thought it through yet, but I guess I want to go to my brother's school." Harry nodded in satisfaction. After all, Harry is attending S University, one of the top universities in the country, and Julia would need to put in a lot of effort to get in. While I didn't have to worry too much with my grades, Julia clearly realized this as well, and from time to time, she would ask Harry to tutor her. Today was no exception. She took out her textbooks from her backpack, ready to have Harry help her study. Miss Mitchell was used to it and smiled happily as Harry gave Julia some tutoring, then took me home. That night Julia did not come back. I had my people follow my instructions and put the drug in Harry's tea that he was supposed to drink every day after recovery. I was in the room, watching the hospital situation on the computer's camera. Harry's was the best room in the hospital, and usually no nurse would enter unless Harry called, so I watched, on the video, as Harry drank the tea as usual. Then he continued to explain the problems to Julia, and the two of them often leaned their heads together while working, very affectionate. Soon after, the effects of the medicine kicked in, and an unnatural flush appeared on his face. His eyes also became hazy as he looked at Julia. Julia looked up and asked, somewhat puzzled, "Brother, why is your face so red?" Harry gazed at her with a hazy look. "Julia, you're so beautiful." After saying that, he took hold of Julia's hand, and his eyes gradually became more intense and full of desire. The Julia who was held felt a bit flustered, and instinctively avoided Harry's intense gaze. "Brother, what's wrong with you? Your hand is so hot." Harry was completely under the influence of the medicine, and suddenly hugged Julia. "Julia, I love you. I really love you so much. Why do you have to marry that brat from the Smith family? Brother, what are you talking about? Let go of me." Julia struggled to push him away. Harry shook his head in pain and finally loosened his grip. Seeing this, Julia seized the opportunity and broke free, retreating to the edge of the bed with tears in her eyes. Harry looked pained, tears streaming down his face. "Julia, I am the one who loves you the most. Why, Julia, I feel so bad. Can you help me, please?" Julia backed away in disbelief. Just when I thought she was going to leave, she stopped in her tracks, looking at the pained Harry. After a moment, she trembled as she walked back to Harry's side. "Brother, are you in pain? What can I do to help you?" Hearing this, Harry completely lost his mind and pressed Julia down, eagerly kissing her. I looked at the two people overlapping in the video and suddenly felt a bit nauseous. I hurriedly saved the video and then closed the computer screen. The door to the hospital room behind her could be opened at any time, as long as she wanted. Unfortunately, she did not. "Julia, this is your last chance for a choice." At 4 o'clock the next morning, I clearly heard someone stealthily closing Julia's room door. During breakfast Mrs. Mitchell was still wondering why she hadn't gotten up, and I casually replied to her after taking a sip of porridge. "Julia probably stayed up too late studying yesterday and is tired." Not until the sun was high in the sky did Julia finally get up wearily. At this time, Harry had already returned home and saw Julia coming out. He looked at her with a burning gaze. Julia instantly lowered her head, shy and afraid to look at him. Mrs. Mitchell didn't notice anything and called Julia to hurry over for breakfast. The atmosphere between the two was awkward yet a bit sweet. During the meal, they occasionally glanced at each other. I couldn't stand it any longer and finally got up and left the table. After that day, Julia never came to see Simon again. Probably out of guilt, she didn't know how to face him. Instead, Simon later thought that his previous attitude towards Julia was not good and felt a bit guilty, so he specifically went to find her to apologize. I watched Julia struggling and wandering between two men, finding it quite ridiculous. As the college entrance examination approached, Harry became increasingly diligent in finding Julia for tutoring. June 8th, the height of summer, with the sun blazing overhead. After the last exam of the college entrance examination, I walked out of the exam hall and across the way, Harry caught sight of Kevin Parker. He stood in the dappled shade of the tree, wearing a purple-black sports outfit. A white baseball cap covered his chestnut short hair. When he noticed me looking over, he smiled at me with his lips curled, his affectionate eyes slightly squinting. This is the first time I saw Kevin Parker dressed casually, looking more unruly and energetic than before. Kevin Parker is really strange. He knows I have ill intentions towards him, yet he still persistently approaches me. I ignored his gaze and walked towards Harry. "Brother, Mom asked me to pick you both up to go to the restaurant. She has already made a reservation. She wants to celebrate you two properly. Julia hasn't come out yet, and I wonder how she did on the exam." I smiled at Harry. With brother helping Julia review, she's sure to pass. Upon hearing, review, Harry had an awkward expression on his face. He gave a dry, aha, in response. Out of the corner of my eye, Kevin Parker was still smiling at me from under the tree shade. I just made up an excuse about having to go home early to avoid Harry's gaze, and slipped into the alley near the school gate. Moments later, Kevin Parker strolled over leisurely. "Mr. Parker, what brings you here today?" Kevin Parker pulled out a gift box from his pocket, opened it, and it was a platinum watch. The dial was adorned with a circle of small diamonds, which was indeed very beautiful, just to my taste. "Happy graduation, Nina." Kevin Parker has started to learn from some time. Mr. Mitchell called me Nina. I didn't move, and I didn't feel Kevin Parker would come here just to give me a watch. Sure enough, Kevin Parker saw that I didn't move and said with a smile, "Nina, if you accept the gift, I will tell you some good news." "What good news?" I asked, taking the gift box. "Actually, I could probably guess it. James, that old man is about to collapse." I nodded, pretending to be happy. "Mr. Parker, indeed. He is exceptionally capable." He asked me tentatively, "I heard your brother has started to take over the company again. Are you really willing to hand over the company to him?" "Nina, Mr. Parker, you're joking. The company has always belonged to my brother. I've never thought of replacing him." Mr. Parker, smart as Kevin Parker, he had already sensed my hostility towards Harry. For example, when I promised to help Kevin Parker get the other shares of the Mitchell family company, but didn't ask for anything in return, no gain, no effort, it didn't benefit me at all, and yet I asked for nothing, which was too strange. Kevin Parker couldn't figure me out, which is why he became curious about me, but to others, I am just the young lady from the company who came to learn and have fun, and the future heir will only be Harry. So, James is also focusing on dealing with these two, father and son. At first, when he planned the car accident that harmed Mr. Mitchell, Harry should have also been in the car. It was just that he got out of the car at the last minute, which allowed him to escape a disaster. In the evening, I changed my clothes and arrived at the restaurant, pushing open the door of the private room. Mr. Mitchell, 4 people were chatting happily and harmoniously. When they saw me come in, their laughter and conversation immediately quieted down. Mrs. Mitchell greeted me to sit down. "Nina, come here. We've been waiting for you." I sat on the chair to the left of Julia. On the table, Julia happily talked about funny stories from the exam. However, the real highlight came after dinner. Mrs. Mitchell arranged for the cake to be brought in by the waiter. The cake was magnificent. "So beautiful, it was unbelievable," Julia exclaimed in surprise. "It's so beautiful, Mom. I love it so much. As long as you like it." Meanwhile, Mrs. Mitchell along with Mr. Mitchell, Harry took out the birthday gifts they had prepared. Mrs. Mitchell sent 2 identical haute couture dresses, with beautiful white hems. Mr. Mitchell sent 2 pens made of platinum, inlaid with diamonds and rubies. Although they are different, it is easy to see they belong to the same series. Harry sent 2 pairs of high heels in different colors, with sparkling crystal uppers. I don't like any of these. In their hearts, Julia is their little princess. What about me? What am I? I squinted at the words written in cream on the cake, wishing Julia Nina, happy birthday, thinking back to the last birthday. Mrs. Mitchell also arranged a particularly large cake and invited many wealthy women and ladies for a birthday party. Ultimately, it was said to showcase sisterly harmony. And at that time I surprisingly managed not to explode in anger, just telling Mrs. Mitchell that I didn't like having so many people around. After all, that was the first birthday celebrated for me by my parents in those 17 years. In the environment with my foster parents, it was good enough to have food to eat. A birthday cake was a luxury I could hardly dream of. I remember teacher Linda bought the first cake for the original owner. And the original owner couldn't help but cry when tasting the soft and sweet cake. But now I am actually arranged to spend time with the person I dislike the most, becoming Mrs. Mitchell to showcase the Mitchell family as a harmonious tool to the outside world. I didn't touch the cake back then. I just felt nauseous just by looking at it. I didn't expect that there wouldn't be so many people this year. Mrs. Mitchell still arranged to celebrate with Julia. Can't the Mitchell family afford to hold another birthday party with their financial power? Of course not. It's just that Mrs. Mitchell thinks that my birthday and Julia's are on the same day, and celebrating together not only makes it livelier but also shows others our sisterly bond. I watched coldly as the Mitchell family turned off the lights, lit the candles, and sang the birthday song in the flickering candlelight. Julia smiled with a very happy face. There's a saying, what is it again? Taking a step back opens up the sea and sky. Oh no, it should be enduring a bit gains an inch. Looking at the harmonious family scene, I couldn't help but laugh mockingly. Birthday song was interrupted by my laughter, and several people looked at me in confusion. Julia still had a happy smile on her face. She looked at me with innocent eyes, like a pure little deer. I laughed. Mom, haven't you asked me if I like it yet? Ms. Mitchell was stunned. Harry heard this and frowned. The private room fell silent for a moment. I hate celebrating my birthday with other people. Ms. Mitchell finally reacted. Nina, Julia, why are they other people? She's your sister. So, Julia, do you think she's some illegitimate daughter who came out of your stomach? I don't have the fortune to have a sister like that. I looked at Ms. Mitchell and saw nothing but open disdain and disappointment in her eyes. Ms. Mitchell stared at me in shock, speechless, at this moment. Mitchell finally spoke. He sighed. At this moment Mr. Mitchell finally spoke. He sighed. Nina, I know you have some resentment inside, but everyone has their own fate. Maybe those hardships were helping you grow. Now you're back. Let the past be the past. Nonsense. I stared at him with bloodshot eyes. Are you saying that I deserve to be mistaken for someone else, deserve to be treated like an animal, and deserve to have almost been sold and raped by that couple? Have you forgotten? I could have lived a happy life, free from worries, with a loving family, but I suffered so much for her, and in the end, I got nothing. You tell me, what reason do I have to forgive? What reason do I have to let it go? Several people looked shocked. Julia was both scared and wronged, tears welling in her eyes. Why didn't you tell us anything? We know nothing. There are many things you don't know. As long as you want to investigate, how could you not find out? The irony is that you didn't even want to look. That's it. You gave me hope, then broke it yourself, throwing me into a deeper abyss. I finally realized there really are parents who don't love their children. I will no longer have any expectations, not looking at them anymore. I got up and rushed out of the suffocating private room. I took a taxi back to the Mitchell family villa. Sitting in the car as the cool evening breeze brushed past me, I gazed at the city at night, with traffic flowing on the overpass, and the city still brightly lit. In June, I felt a bone-chilling cold. Among these myriad lights, not a single one belongs to me. 1 week after Julia and I both received acceptance letters from School S, I received the news of Mr. Mitchell's car accident. Mrs. Mitchell was so shocked when she heard the news that she fainted. Julia looked anxious and rushed to support Mrs. Mitchell. After a moment, Mrs. Mitchell slowly woke up and hurried to go to the hospital to see Mr. Mitchell, so the three of us hurriedly took the Mitchell family car to the hospital. Outside the emergency room, Harry got the news before us and arrived ahead of time. He sat listlessly on the bench outside the emergency room, his brows furrowed, his entire body shrouded in pain. Julia called out to him in a panic, "Brother, how's Dad?" At the sound, Harry looked up, and his dead-eyed gaze finally showed emotion when he saw Julia clearly, his voice hoarse and weary. He said, "Julia, you're here. How is your father?" "Mulhan, tell me, Mom, calm down first." I steadied Mrs. Mitchell. Julia approached Harry worriedly. After a long silence, Harry slowly spoke. "It's not looking good. The doctor said even if he survives, there's a chance he'll be paralyzed." Paralyzed. Mrs. Mitchell collapsed onto me again as her body went limp. I helped her sit down in a chair. Mrs. Mitchell breathed heavily, tears streaming down her face. She cried out, "What will we do if your father becomes paralyzed?" I held her close and softly reassured her, "Mom, it won't happen. Dad has his own fate. He will survive. He will live on, and witness with his own eyes everything he holds dear being destroyed by the child he loves most." Over an hour later, the unconscious Mr. Mitchell was wheeled out of the operating room and transferred to the intensive care unit. Through the glass, Mrs. Mitchell tearfully gazed at Mr. Mitchell, who lay half alive on the hospital bed with various instruments inserted into his body. The doctor said Mr. Mitchell had injured his spine, causing nerve damage. Even if he woke up, he would most likely be paralyzed. As soon as Mr. Mitchell had his accident, all matters large and small of the company fell to Harry. With Harry's efforts and Kevin Parker's covert assistance, Harry successfully found evidence of James hiring a hitman and sent James to prison, and as agreed, 1/3 of the shares in his hands were transferred to Kevin Parker. 5 days later, Mr. Mitchell woke up and was transferred out of the intensive care unit. He still couldn't speak complete sentences, his words were fragmented, but he could understand some meaning. Mrs. Mitchell saw that Mr. Mitchell was awake, and tears kept flowing. In the following days, Julia visited the ward every day. Harry was busy flying around, only coming once in a while. On the day Mrs. Mitchell pushed for marriage, I and Harry were both present. Mrs. Mitchell was in tears, looking sorrowful. She cried as she held Julia's hands. Julia, your father is not worried about Muhan and Nina's matters. The only thing he is concerned about is your marriage. Remember when you were little, your father dreamed of seeing you in a wedding dress, happy. If he were to suddenly be gone one day, that would be the regret of his life. Julia, I have also agreed with your Aunt Song. She is very much hoping that you will become her daughter-in-law, and the wedding date has already been chosen. If she can see you get married, even if your father suddenly passes away one day, he will have died with his eyes closed. I don't want your father to leave with regrets. Julia had red eyes and nodded under the expectant gaze of Mrs. Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell immediately felt relieved, holding Julia, and couldn't help but cry again. I caught a glimpse of Harry, who seemed to want to speak several times but closed his mouth again. When Julia nodded, the fist he had tightly clenched also relaxed, his eyes filled with despair. Since Julia agreed to get married, Mrs. Mitchell started to take charge of Julia. Julia and Harry were busy, and I was the only one who often came to the hospital. The arranged nurse handed me the cooked congee, and I expressionlessly took it, feeding it to Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell had trembling lips, and occasionally some broth would leak from his mouth. I picked up a half-damp towel beside me and wiped it clean for him bit by bit. Although he couldn't speak, his eyes could still convey emotions. Mr. Mitchell looked at me with eyes full of comfort, but without a trace of guilt. I whispered to him while feeding him, Dad, I remember last time you told me that everyone has their fate, and we must accept it. So now, is this also your fate? I let out a low laugh. Mr. Mitchell was taken aback for a moment, then quickly reacted. He became furious, and anger and shock gradually welled up in his eyes. Mr. Mitchell glared at me, his eyes wide with rage. Dad, this is fate. You have to accept it. Mr. Mitchell was so angry he tried to move his body to get up, but after struggling for a long time, he couldn't move at all. It was just a waste of effort. What terrified him even more was that he couldn't speak. The nurse looked down, expressionless, ignoring the sounds of Mr. Mitchell struggling. I laughed, and when I raised my hand to touch my face, I realized I was already in tears. I lost interest in staying with Mr. Mitchell and got up to leave the hospital, taking a car back to the villa. Mrs. Mitchell hasn't returned yet, probably still worrying about Julia's marriage. On the wall of the living room, there hangs the Mitchell family's family portrait. I silently looked at the family portrait displayed in the living room. The 5 people in the photo all had bright smiles. This was once the most desired affection of the original owner, and the days spent with the adoptive parents were the shadow of the original owner's childhood, a shadow that permeated the entire childhood and adolescence of the original owner. Even now, I have already replaced her soul. When I occasionally dream back to those heart-wrenching days at midnight, my body can't help but tremble. That was a place that made her fearful just by thinking about stepping into it. She finally returned to her true home, but unexpectedly, what awaited her was another nightmare. It was also her biological parents who told her that in her life, she was not worthy of having the genuine love of parents. What ruined her life was not someone else, but her closest and dearest. I no longer looked at that photo and went straight back to my room. Half an hour after I entered the room, I heard Harry's suppressed angry voice from downstairs. Why do you have to marry him? Clearly, we already. Then came Julia's choked sobs. She cried and said intermittently, but this is what Dad wanted to see the most. I can't let him leave with regrets, brother. The sound from downstairs was small at times, but I clearly heard Harry say that sentence. It should have been Simon that I'm engaged to. Nina, Julia, if you don't want to, we don't have to get married. I closed my eyes. The noises from downstairs were faint yet persistent, not stopping for a long time. They probably didn't expect me to come back so early today. Not marrying. How easy it is to say. This marriage, Julia, is actually something more willing to tie the knot than you can imagine. Brother, over here, Julia is having all sorts of problems. Simon is not doing much better over there. While abroad, Summer heard the news that the two were getting married and immediately called me to question it. Nina, didn't you say that as long as I stayed abroad, nothing would happen? Your sister and Simon are about to get married. If you don't believe me, you can come back. But just remember, if something goes wrong later, I can't be responsible. Summer angrily hung up the phone. but eventually didn't return to the country, and Simon also agreed to the marriage because of Summer's sudden coldness and pressure from his parents. The person I arranged at the company told me that Harry is preparing to give 20% of the company's shares as a dowry to Julia. I looked coldly at the contract I had already prepared. Mitchell family company shares are impossible to give to Julia as a dowry. The wedding was scheduled exactly on Valentine's Day, and before dawn, as the bride. Julia got up to start getting ready. Mrs. Mitchell invited most of the celebrities in the industry, and the wedding venue is set at the most famous hotel in the city. I watched the crowd arriving one after another, feeling extremely happy. The more people come, the happier I am. Kevin Parker also graciously attended, and as a VIP, Mrs. Mitchell arranged for me to host Kevin Parker. Kevin Parker looked at me and smiled, asking, "What's up? Are you so happy because your cheap sister is getting married?" I nodded. My sister is getting married, so naturally I, as the older sister, am happy. In Kevin Parker front of me, I was also tired of pretending in this regard. Anyway, he wouldn't believe me if I said I didn't dislike the Mitchell family siblings. Moreover, I also prepared a particularly large gift for them. Trust me, they will definitely be moved to tears when they see it. Kevin Parker, after hearing it, he laughed silently. That's really rare to see you like this. Julia chose a Western-style wedding. Mr. Mitchell was also brought over from the hospital. Since that day, I haven't visited Mr. Mitchell in the hospital again. He is now even thinner, sitting in a wheelchair wearing a loose suit. Since coming out of the hospital, Mr. Mitchell hasn't even glanced at me, but I still went up to greet him, only to find that Mr. Mitchell gave me a warning look. It's better not to see, so he just closed his eyes and ignored me. Once upon a time, the president of the Mitchell Group has fallen to this point, which is truly lamentable. P.S. Usually, the bride walks with her father, but because Mr. Mitchell's health was not good, it was Harry who led Julia to Simon. Amid the accompaniment of the wedding march, Julia linked arms with Harry and slowly walked down the red carpet. The hotel's dreamy lights shone on Julia, making her look extraordinarily beautiful. Not far away, Simon was dressed in a suit, tall and handsome. With arched eyebrows and starry eyes, he wore almost no smile on his face, and the upward curve at the corners of his mouth seemed extremely forced. I inexplicably remembered what the book said: Julia and Simon are a match made in heaven. It's a pity that this perfect couple has such good looks but wasted them. One is arrogant and does not respect others, casually humiliating them. The other takes it for granted to possess others' parents, being fickle. What a pity that this perfect couple was torn apart by me. From my front row seat, I saw Harry hand over Julia's hand to Simon, his hands trembling violently. If it weren't for the lights masking it, many people would have seen that his eyes were already red. After handing over Julia to Simon, Harry quietly left the stage. To avoid awkwardness, the host signaled the staff to play the video of the bride and groom's love story. Dear guests, let us watch the growth video of Mr. Simon and Miss Mitchell together, and send our best wishes to the newlyweds. As soon as the words fell, the images appeared on the big screen. However, this video is not Mrs. Mitchell and Simon's mother carefully prepared love story video, but rather the review materials I prepared. Aside from the scene in the hospital, there was also the one in the office of Mitchell Group Company. Well, it was very shocking. For a moment, everyone in the room fell silent. And after realizing what was happening, the room erupted in chaos. Julia, the smile on her face had not faded yet when she turned to see the video. In an instant, the color drained from her face, and she stared at the video in horror, collapsing to the ground. Simon clenched his fists tightly, staring intently at the big screen. The video was very clear, and even the sound of Julia grunting could be heard clearly. For a moment, ambiguous sounds filled the entire venue. Mrs. Mitchell was stunned, unable to believe that the people in the video were her beloved son and daughter. Not far away, Kevin Parker looked at me, and I gave him a sly smile. His eyes showed understanding. Harry also saw the video, and moments later he rushed to the stage, shouting, "Shut off the video, shut it off." The stunned staff came back to their senses and hurried to turn off the video, but it was already too late. He protected Julia, but did not notice that Mrs. Mitchell and Mr. Mitchell had fainted from anger. Since that uproar, the Mitchell family has lost face in the circle. The Smith family called off the engagement that day. Backstage at the wedding, Simon's mother was furious and scolded Julia. "I thought you were devoted to my son, but I never expected you to be such a person behind his back. Not only did you secretly flirt with your own brother, But you also wanted to marry my son. It's simply outrageous and shameless. Julia sat on the sofa, holding her head and crying bitterly. Not like this, not like this. Smith family didn't even listen to her explanation, and left angrily. But Simon had already left the wedding venue after the video was released. Julia was Harry holding in his arms and comforting. Mitchell Madam was just waking up and saw this scene again. She was so angry that she couldn't catch her breath, and scolded angrily, You get out of here, get out. I'm worried Mr. Mitchell can't handle it. After Mr. Mitchell passed out, I immediately sent him back to the hospital. Mitchell Madam tearfully questioned Julia. I have always treated you well. Why would you do this to us? How can we face people anymore? I patted Mitchell Madam's back and helped her breathe. Seeing Mrs. Mitchell like this, I frowned and pleaded, Harry, brother, you take her away first. What if Mom gets upset and ends up in the hospital at a time like this? Harry was silent for a moment, then took the crying Julia away from Mrs. Mitchell's sight. Mitchell Madam collapsed into my arms and cried, Nina, why, they could do such a shameful thing. How could they face me and your father? I couldn't answer her. In the novel, the author's depiction of Harry, their feelings is love that begins without knowing why, and deepens without end, but I could never understand how a 16-year sibling relationship could suddenly become love. Simon did indeed go abroad to find Summer, but Summer was met not with a hug from Simon, but with questions. Angry and frightened, she called me and said, Nina, you lied to me. I did what you told me to do. I stayed abroad obediently, but why did you still tell Simon? Why did you lie to me? I coldly replied to her, Summer, I've never been a good person. The Mitchell family company's shares have slightly dropped, but it's not too serious. However, during this time, Julia has been threatening to commit suicide. Harry is overwhelmed with work, and I was initially cultivated by Mr. Mitchell to be Harry's right-hand person, so during this time, I have been assisting Harry in handling the company's affairs. That day, Harry was in a meeting when he received a call from Julia saying she had committed suicide. I was by his side and heard Julia's crying words. In an instant, he got up and left with a brief remark, the meeting is over for today. Then he rushed out, leaving everyone completely confused. I sighed inwardly and stood up, giving a slight nod to the crowd. Sorry, everyone, the meeting will continue, and the next part will be introduced by Mitchell. After the meeting, I took Lee's secretary to the hospital. Mitchell was disappointed in Harry, but this disappointment was not enough to make Mitchell give up his determination to transfer the shares to Harry, indicating to the secretary Lee to take out the agreement. I held Mr. Mitchell's hand and pressed his fingerprint on it. No matter how Mr. Mitchell struggled, it was futile. In the end, he could only watch helplessly as his fingerprint was stamped on the equity transfer document. Mr. Mitchell couldn't help but shed tears, closing his eyes in despair. Secretary Lee put away the agreement, and I asked him and the caregiver to leave. There were some things I wanted to discuss privately with Mr. Mitchell. On the hospital bed, Mr. Mitchell looked at me with resentment. Perhaps at this moment he realized that I, his daughter, was the real danger. I sat at the head of the bed with a blank expression, my heart as calm as still water. I calmly told him everything that the original owner had experienced. Mitchell, I'll tell you a secret. Your daughter has been dead for a long time. Have you ever heard of reincarnation? In fact, she has been reincarnated 3 times. The first 2 times she died of liver cancer, and the last time she couldn't take it anymore, so she chose to commit suicide. Mr. Mitchell suddenly opened his eyes wide, looking at me in shock. I understood that from Mr. Mitchell, this was equivalent to a fairy tale, but I was too lazy to address his doubts, simply narrating calmly. After her 2 previous bouts with liver cancer, Harry didn't tell you in order not to worry you. When the pain tormented her, no one was by her side to support her. She endured from night to day, and finally, exhausted, she fell into a coma. I paused, thought for a moment, and then continued speaking. At that time, Harry was not having an affair with Julia. Julia successfully married Simon, and it seems she was even pregnant. At that time, you were all focused on the unborn grandchild, and no one noticed her. You all thought she was out having fun. Meanwhile, Harry rarely visited her, and she wanted to escape the hospital, but in the end, she didn't even have the strength to crawl out of bed. When life was nearing its end, she coughed up blood, experiencing pain that sometimes made her lose consciousness. Do you know what it feels like to cough up clots mixed with blood? I looked at Mr. Mitchell, who was staring blankly and crying. It's just like how you're feeling now. watching life slip away from your body helplessly. During her third life, she didn't want to experience such pain again. Before you all found her, she jumped into the river to commit suicide. She no longer wants you. Mr. Mitchell couldn't believe it. But when I calmly recounted the circumstances of the original owner's childhood abuse at the hands of his adoptive parents, his expression gradually shifted from anger to silence. His daughter was already dead. Even if I told him the truth, what could be done? He could never make it up to her again. I looked at Mr. Mitchell lying in the hospital bed, silently crying, but I felt no pity in my heart. After narrating all of this, I left the hospital room without looking back. In every moment he lives afterward, he would spend it in guilt and regret, ultimately dying in remorse, if he does not feel guilty. Then being paralyzed in bed, watching the Mitchell family decline helplessly would be torturous enough for him to last a lifetime. When I returned to Mitchell family, I was surprised to find Julia and Harry kneeling before Mrs. Mitchell, begging for Mrs. Mitchell's forgiveness. Mrs. Mitchell put her hand on her forehead, looking extremely annoyed. "Mom, I'm sorry, I'll change, don't abandon me, please. I only have you left." Julia was crying her heart out, choking on her words as she pleaded with Mrs. Mitchell. She had bandages on her hands, her white dress stained with blood, looking extremely pitiful. Harry was kneeling on the ground, cold and silent. Mrs. Mitchell, sitting on the sofa, turned her face away, unwilling to look at the two people in front of her. At this rate, Mrs. Mitchell will probably be driven crazy by these two people. I walked up to the sofa. "It is important to have self-awareness, Julia. What makes you think you can stay in the house after doing something so damaging to the Mitchell family reputation? You are merely the adopted daughter of the Mitchell family. Your parents kept you here. 1. They couldn't bear to send you back to such a family to suffer. And 2. After all, you are their beloved daughter for over 10 years. They wouldn't just send you back to your original family immediately. But after you and your brother did such a wrong thing, do you think you can still consider yourself as the daughter of the Mitchell family?" Which sister would roll into bed with her brother? Julia was stunned, tears falling unconsciously to the ground. In her early life, she was a little princess pampered by her parents and older brother. In one night, she was told that she was not biologically related, and everything changed. Although her parents still treated her the same, her sense of security gradually diminished, and at this time, her brother's feelings for her also began to change. Thus, she unconsciously started to seize her parents' attention and love, showing off to the original owner. "You see, even if you are the biological daughter, so what? They still love me more." With the protagonist's fate blessing, in the first 3 lives, Julia succeeded. In the past, Julia was very well protected, even though she is experiencing some minor changes and setbacks now. She is still a bit too naive. Children born into wealthy families either face immense pressure from a young age, becoming extremely mature, or they are overly pampered by their families, becoming extremely naive. As soon as I finished speaking, Harry immediately became unsettled. He sternly reprimanded me. "Nina, Mom hasn't said anything yet." I hadn't said anything, and Mrs. Mitchell retaliated on my behalf. "How could you speak to your sister like that?" At this moment Mrs. Mitchell finally took a look at Julia. "You have disappointed me too much." Julia shivered upon hearing this, finally realizing that she would never be able to return to Mitchell family. Her body had always been weak, and after the suicide attempt, the last bit of strength she had left was gone. She could no longer support herself and fainted. Miss Mitchell instinctively tried to catch her, but after seeing Harry holding her, she suddenly realized and pulled her hand back. Harry left a remark, "Since you refuse to forgive her, I will take her away." Mrs. Mitchell watched the two leave, feeling both anxious and angry. I comforted Mrs. Mitchell for a while, then returned to my own room. I tentatively called out to 1207, and after a moment, I actually heard its mechanical voice in my mind. It was a long time before it spoke after answering me. I called it a few more times, but it did not respond. At that moment, I had a strange thought. As if it were checking my task completion, after a while, it finally answered me. "Detection complete. Task completion rate has reached the level to summon the system." Sure enough, I have always had a doubt in my heart that I didn't have time to ask it. Are the two worlds I am in synchronized in time? The passage of 1 year in the world you are currently in is equivalent to 15 days in the real world. 15 days. Then, during the 3 years I've been here, at least a month and a half has passed in the real world. My heart sank, and I asked it, "Is there a way to advance the onset time of the body's illness?" 1207 did not answer me immediately, and after a brief silence, it spoke in a mechanical voice. Your illness has been advanced ahead of schedule. As soon as I finished speaking, I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen and collapsed to the ground. A wave of nausea hit my throat, and I couldn't stop vomiting. I struggled to get up, opened the door, and prepared to go get a drink of water to calm myself down. To my surprise, just as I reached the stairway on the second floor, my throat felt sweet and fishy, and I vomited a chunk of black blood, followed by red blood. Downstairs Mrs. Mitchell heard the commotion and came over, her eyes wide with terror at the sight. Before falling into a coma, I saw Mrs. Mitchell running towards me, terrified, calling my name. When I opened my eyes again, the white walls of the hospital came into view. Mitchell's wife was sitting by my bedside with red eyes. I felt a bit regretful for having let 1207 advance my illness at this time, as it disrupted my original plan. Even with the memories and mental preparation from the previous owner, the memories would become blurred as time passed. Now I feel it personally. It really hurts. After a moment of silence, I asked the crying Mrs. Mitchell, "Mom, am I sick?" Mrs. Mitchell answered me with tears in her eyes, choking back her words, "Nina, it's nothing." I forced a smile. "Mom, just tell me, I know my own body. The doctor said it's liver cancer, late stage." After saying that, Mrs. Mitchell couldn't help but burst into tears, speaking in a broken voice, "You're only 18, my Nina." I looked at the white ceiling. "Mom, I beg you, can you not tell my brother and dad?" Ms. Mitchell was a bit puzzled but still nodded in agreement. "Since I got sick, Mrs. Mitchell has been almost inseparable from me. I finally managed to get some time off from the hospital. After carefully covering up my illness, I went with Secretary Lee to the location arranged by Kevin Parker. After I got sick, I arranged for Secretary Lee to negotiate with Kevin Parker for the shares held by Mr. Mitchell, but his condition was that I must meet him in person, otherwise he wouldn't agree to my terms, no matter how well I disguised it. Kevin Parker still saw through the problem at a glance. He frowned at me and asked, "Why have you lost so much weight?" I coldly replied to him, "That is not Mr. Parker's question." Kevin Parker stared at me for a moment, then sneered, "In that case, let's talk about the Mitchell Group Company. The conditions are already written in the contract. The first condition is to give me $300 million. Kevin Parker looked at me. $300 million. I know the Mitchell family's company's worth far exceeds this amount, but I only want $300 million, Miss Nina. What a clever scheme. I smiled at Kevin Parker. Likewise, I signaled Secretary Lee to leave the contract and go out. The second condition is to help me fake my death and arrange a new identity for me. After coming out, I still couldn't help but feel like vomiting. Secretary Lee, seeing this, hurriedly sent me back to the hospital. Harry settled Julia in a villa he bought, and hasn't been home for a long time. After Julia moved out, I called her biological father, who had just been released from prison. I told him Julia's address, and also told him that if he just went to her place, Julia would give him a lot of money. Since that foster father passed away, Julia and the two of them have been quite troubled. But that day Harry suddenly came to the hospital. I knew Mrs. Mitchell still told him, "Mom really is unreliable." He sat beside me for a long time, and finally said, "I'm sorry." I closed my eyes and remained silent, fully aware that I had no right to forgive him on behalf of the original owner. After that day, Harry gradually started coming home. Mrs. Mitchell still thought her son had turned back to the right path and was very happy. I chose a fine and sunny day to arrive at the edge of the cliff by the sea. Harry and made a video call. Harry was dealing with something in the study when he saw it was me calling, and a faint smile appeared on his face. The sea breeze howled by. I called Harry, "Brother." Harry's smile gradually faded. "Nina, where are you now?" I looked at the vast deep blue sea in front of me. "Brother, I'm in so much pain. I can't hold on any longer." Nina, where are you? Don't move around." He hurriedly left the study and kept asking me, "Where are you? Tell your brother." "Okay, your brother is coming right away. I'm on the cliff by the sea. Brother, you must take my bone marrow and live well. Goodbye, brother." Harry got into the car and started it tremblingly. "Nina, don't be impulsive. Don't do anything reckless. I'm coming right away. Wait for me." I turned my back to the sea and fell down. There was a scream from Harry's phone, Harry, that tore his heart apart. "Nina." The sharp sea wind made me smile at the corner of my mouth. I hung up the phone and dropped it into the turbulent sea along with me. Everything is finally about to end. The seawater rushed into my nostrils, and the strong feeling of suffocation and weightlessness made me instinctively struggle. The seawater above was churning. Someone dived into the water and pulled me up. The tremendous impact and the water rushing in caused intense pain in my limbs and a stifling ache in my chest. The bitter liquid in my throat made me feel sick. The person hugged me tightly, while calling for a doctor. In a daze, I seemed to hear Kevin Parker scolding me. What a madman. At the end of long days, I stand before you, you will see my scars. I know I was once hurt, have been healed before. To Gore, Kevin Parker said that I had been unconscious for a whole week. He was a bit angry at my madness and lack of trust in him. In his words, it was an insult to his character, because besides him, I had also arranged another group of people to rescue me at sea. I have always valued my life, so before jumping, I had already protected my body with clothes that had shock absorption. I don't trust him. To be precise, I don't trust anyone here. When I woke up, Kevin Parker was sitting at the table beside my bed, having a meeting. I was connected to various tubes, and a nearby machine was beeping regularly. He had only turned on the light on his side, so I could see him clearly. He speaks English fluently and charmingly, in a low and magnetic voice. I looked at him, quietly waiting, uncertain how much time has passed. He finally closed the computer and walked over to my side. Are you awake? Do you want to eat something? I shook my head. Kevin Parker, I won't live long. Even if you have the best doctors come and see me, I can live at most half a year, and that's already the limit. You can't keep me. Kevin Parker stood at the foot of my bed, his back to the light, half his face in shadow. He didn't speak for a long time. After quite some time, he finally spoke. I had someone prepare some delicious food for you, so you better eat well. After saying that, he didn't look at me again and left the hospital room. I was lost in thought, staring at the direction he left. From the beginning, it was impossible for us. If I had a way to go back home, I would never give up my mom and dad for him, even if the path home was painful. I would never give it up. How could I bear to make someone who loves me so much sad? So I maintained absolute rationality and never let my heart be moved. After that day, Kevin Parker rarely appeared in front of me, but he would send someone from time to time to tell me about the situation in the country. The information was very detailed and included some videos. He understands that I want to know, although I also have my own ways of knowing. The Mitchell family company. Kevin Parker has officially taken control and become the head of the Mitchell Group company. Harry is stubbornly refusing to give up his small share, which was left to him early on by Mr. Mitchell, but Kevin Parker will definitely not allow Harry to continue in the company. As for what he plans to do, it's none of my business. Harry leaving the Mitchell Group is just a matter of time. Mrs. Mitchell went crazy. I was not surprised to hear this news, because before Mr. Mitchell had an accident, I had already started unknowingly giving her sedatives, either putting them in her water or in her soup. Such drugs can cause certain damage to the nerves. They can induce hallucinations and mental abnormalities. The day I jumped into the sea, Mrs. Mitchell also heard it. She quickly followed Harry to find the place where I jumped in. Harry called the police, but they only found my phone and some pieces of clothing that had been bitten to shreds. They thought I was really dead, my body sinking in the sea and being eaten by fish and crabs. After enduring her husband's paralysis, learning about her son having an affair with her adopted daughter, and her daughter committing suicide by jumping into the sea, her body could only be eaten by fish and crabs. Mrs. Mitchell has completely collapsed, and her former elegance is no more. The last straw that broke the camel's back was the letter I left for her. The letter spoke of the original owner's injustice, while also telling her that I would never forgive her until my death, and she will never, ever have a chance to make amends again. In the letter, I asked her, you keep saying you are not biased, but your actions tell me otherwise. She is your child. I will never be your first choice. I once really longed to receive the love of my parents, but in your eyes, there is only Julia. Clearly, I am your biological daughter. I am the daughter you went to great lengths to find. If there had been no mix-up, no Julia, we would truly be a happy family. You and Dad would be healthy, have many descendants, my brother would be successful in his career, and I would have a happy marriage, loved by everyone. In addition, I also included a small gift for her. That is a recording of Julia discussing with her friends after learning that summer was arranged by me. Among them, one person said, your sister and Summer are too shameless, stealing someone else's fiancé. Why not just throw sulfuric acid on their faces and see how they will continue to be seductresses afterwards? Later Julia playfully refused her. Despite that, what happened later proved that Mrs. Mitchell was serious. She began to think that everything was Julia's fault, and one day she showed up at her door with a bottle of sulfuric acid. She splashed it on the unsuspecting Julia, ruining Julia's face and one eye. When Harry rushed to the hospital from the company, Julia was screaming in pain. Mrs. Mitchell laughed absurdly, sending chills down everyone's spine. To Harry, Julia was his everything, and his mother had destroyed his treasure. Was it painful? Of course it was. But this was not the worst part. Mrs. Mitchell was personally committed to a psychiatric hospital by Harry, who also prepared to schedule a skin graft surgery for Julia. There had once been genuine affection in Mrs. Mitchell's heart for Julia, but more than that, it was to declare her own generosity and kindness to others, to gain praise from outsiders. After all, her own children were born to her. No matter how she treated them, they had to be grateful. Besides, they had already brought the original host back from that place. What more could the original host want? But she did not know that while others praised her kindness to her face, they laughed at her stupidity in their hearts, treating an adopted daughter better than her own biological daughter, even belittling her biological daughter in public to elevate the adopted daughter, making the biological daughter the laughing stock. Therefore, I do not feel sorry for Mrs. Mitchell. I think she deserves it. The original owner had long been dead, and what remained was merely her shell. The year the original owner died, no one loved her, as I have said. I never had the right to forgive them for the original owner. I am someone who must repay grudges, and I have never been able to repay grievances with virtue. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why the system chose me. Meanwhile, Kevin Parker told me some news. After I reminded him to pay attention to Mitchell Group's accounts, his people discovered a big secret while auditing the company's accounts. The Mitchell Group previously had accounts that evaded taxes amounting to $18 billion. If tax evasion occurred during the term of the previous legal representative, the current legal representative is not responsible. Any penalties will be imposed on the company and the previous legal representative, and in serious cases, the previous legal representative or those directly responsible for tax evasion will face criminal liability. Kevin Parker would definitely not let such a great opportunity slip by. Harry is unaware of Mr. Mitchell's tax evasion issues, and he is still struggling with his shares in the Mitchell Group. The Mitchell family's most valuable asset is the Mitchell Group company, and after going through so much, even the wealth of the Mitchell family cannot withstand such turmoil. In order to sell property to pay fines, where would Harry find money to fund Julia's surgery? Giving up equity is the best choice for him to get money. In the novel, this part is described implicitly, but at that time, I didn't think of it until I entered the company and checked the accounts. When I keenly connected the plot of the novel and discovered this secret, at that time, Mr. Mitchell ultimately underestimated me. He never thought I would discover this issue, nor did he believe I would expose it. In his eyes, the Mitchell family should be like grasshoppers on the same rope. When one thrives, all thrive. When one suffers, all suffer. But I am not. My purpose from the very beginning has always been revenge. This is also the reason why, after discovering my true identity, Harry insisted on handing the company over to Harry, even if he was confused. After obtaining sufficient evidence, Kevin Parker submitted this information to the domestic tax authorities. With solid evidence, the Mitchell family's assets were almost all seized. Harry has now been driven to a dead end, and he ultimately gave up his shares in the Mitchell Group. From then on, the Mitchell Group had no relation to the Mitchell family anymore, and the Mitchell family also disappeared from this circle of wealth. The decline of the Mitchell family is lamentable, but soon no one remembered them. In this arena of fame and fortune, there are plenty of people climbing up. I laid a huge chess game, intricately connected, even calculating myself into it. They say one wrong move can lead to losing everything, but I must win. Harry finally managed to prepare the money to Julia for her skin change, but Julia disappeared. She was kidnapped by her biological father and taken back to that dark, foul-smelling alley. I had someone tell that foster father that as long as he brought Julia back home at that time, he would receive a large sum of money. Such a good deal. He of course agreed quickly. However, he was someone who wouldn't get up early without profit, so he naturally needed a little incentive first. The foster father had been in prison for various reasons and was a tough guy who used to hang around with local bullies when he was young. This can be seen from how he would often beat the original owner when they were young. Harry almost went crazy upon hearing this news. He searched desperately for Julia, and finally found the foster father's address at the school the original master used to attend. That might have been the only time in his 3 lives that he set foot in his biological sister's past. When he saw Julia beaten and injured in a low and dark small room, he must have been very painful. After the foster father brought Julia back to the hometown, in order to prove it, he sent me a video. In the video, Julia had her hands and feet tied and was kept in a low room, and that small room was familiar to me. It was the original owner's room and also the place where the original owner hid after being beaten. Now it has become a dirty and messy storage room. Harry almost wanted to kill that foster father, to save Julia. He was injured in the leg and stabbed twice. He was also quite capable, forcibly taking Julia and escaping. The person was saved, but because he didn't receive timely medical attention, he was left with aftereffects and now limps, and Julia even after undergoing plastic surgery. Her face could not return to its former appearance due to the extensive damage. She couldn't bear it any longer and committed suicide again, jumping from the 28th floor. The way to destroy Harry is not to leave him penniless, but to make him lose his spiritual support. In the end, his spirit and body separated, leading to mental illness. Yet, he sought death but couldn't find it. From then on, this noisy world became a cage that trapped him. Harry sued his adoptive father upon returning, charging him with intentional injury and human trafficking, resulting in his adoptive father being imprisoned. I used the money I promised my adoptive father to hire inmates in prison to beat him up from time to time. Besides me, there was another group of people who were also commissioned to make sure my adoptive father suffered in prison. I know that it was Harry who arranged it. His methods are much harsher than mine. My adoptive father's days in prison can truly be described as worse than death. After learning that Julia had jumped, I started to faint more and more often. That day I woke up and asked the white nurse beside me to play a song. He walked into my hospital room with a gloomy expression, and his once affectionate eyes were now filled with coldness. "Why won't you take your medicine?" I slightly raised my hand to signal him to come over, and the white nurse wisely stepped out. Kevin Parker walked over to me with a cold face. I looked into his eyes and softly said, "I don't want to die ugly. I don't want to spend my last moments seeing the hospital's white ceiling and smelling the disinfectant of the hospital. Every moment here reminds me of the original owner's despair at dying alone in the hospital. Please let me leave." Kevin Parker asked me, "Where do you want to go?" "Where to go? I don't know. I just want to leave here." Kevin Parker ultimately, I still let go. I left the hospital, bought a seaside villa, and hired a family doctor and a female caregiver for myself. The family doctor is a white uncle, who has never married and is a lover of freedom. He is not just a family doctor, but also a gardener. That day he planted laurel trees in my yard, along with clusters of roses. I walked out of the house wrapped in a blanket, watching him busy, and asked him, "Did you buy all these, Mr. William?" "No, it wasn't me. It was a Chinese gentleman who brought them." Later, the buds on the roses slowly blossomed and soon filled the entire yard. One evening, after Mr. William injected me with medication, I expressed my desire to go to the coast to watch the sunset. He picked me up and placed me in a wheelchair. My lower limbs had lost the strength to move, and he pushed me to the seaside. The golden afterglow of the sunset spilled over the shimmering sea, and as time passed, the sky quietly changed. Like a blazing fire, it spread from the setting sun, rapidly climbing into the sky, scaling the pure clouds, turning the sky red, forcefully dyeing the white clouds into a dreamy orange red. I looked up, gazing at the splendid sunset clouds. The sea breeze brushed against my cheeks, lifting my hair. The gaze of the person next to me was intense yet restrained, making it impossible for me to ignore. I said softly, "Kevin Parker, I want to go home now." The person beside me was taken aback, crouched down to look at me, and carefully held my hand. I did not resist. "Okay, I'll arrange the plane now. We're going back to China." "No." I shook my head and let go of my hand. After that day, Kevin Parker often appeared at my home. My condition worsened, and in the end, I couldn't even get out of bed, coughing up blood in large amounts. When it hurt, Kevin Parker was by my side, holding my hand tightly. Perhaps my hand was too cold, causing his hand to tremble slightly. I once asked 1207, "Why me?" 1207 answered this question in a mechanical voice. The original character was merely a figure shaped by the author's pen. She, in the two-dimensional world, could not change the final outcome. which is also the reason why even after being reborn 3 times, she could not alter the ending. I see. I remember it was the last day of October. I was lying in bed. Mr. William and the caregiver had been sent away by me, and upon hearing the news, Kevin Parker hurriedly rushed back from the company. My voice was very soft. I could barely hear it myself. Kevin Parker, I want to see the roses in the yard. Can you go and pick them for me? Kevin Parker, after a moment of hesitation, he finally left the room to pick a rose for me. After he left, I could no longer hold back and spat out a mouthful of blood, my consciousness gradually peeling away from this body. Congratulations, you have successfully completed this mission, and your parents are waiting for you to come home. A mechanical voice sounded. I no longer wanted to know where 1207 would go after that, perhaps in some unknown place. There were countless unwilling souls. I took one last look at her lying in bed. Kevin Parker was gently wiping the blood from the corner of her lips. He placed the rose he had picked between her hands. In the end, he buried his head down, but did not notice that the person on the bed was recovering her frail body at an eerie speed. So finally, I wish Nina, as Teacher Linda said. May you have peace year after year, and may all your wishes come true, free and passionate, to appreciate the beauty of this world. From then on, she was just Nina, normal Nina's Nina. When I opened my eyes again, it was still the white ceiling, and there was a figure beside me inserting a vibrant angel's trumpet into the vase on my bedside table. I took a long time to move my hand, as if sensing something. She turned to look at me. Nina, tears instantly blurred my vision. And I cried as if it were raining, unable to say a word for a moment. She hugged me. You're awake. That's good, that's good. The hospital room door opened, and a middle-aged man in a suit came in. Seeing me crying, he paused for a few seconds, his eyes slowly turned red, and after realizing, he quickly came over. Dad, Mom, I've missed you so much. I was really scared I might never see you again. No, you're awake now, aren't you? It won't happen. The sunlight outside was gentle and warm. And I finally also welcomed my light. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.